Chapter 1265. To Smoke Cloud City. When he heard that Murong Shui and the others had to go to Smoke City, Yi Zichen knit his brows. He sensed that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Could this be a repeat of the incident in Barren Sand City? That was what Yi Zichen was thinking, but he didn't say it out loud. What's your mission in Smoke Cloud City? This is a mission from the Academy. A large amount of cloud tobacco has appeared in the vicinity of Smoke Cloud City. The Academy has sent us to collect some. Murong Shui replied with a smile, then raised her eyebrows. I know what you're thinking. Are you worried that it'll be like Barren Sand City? But this time it's different. Yi Zichen understood the effects of the cloud tobacco. It was a pill refining material that could greatly increase the success rate of pill refinement. Smoke Cloud City was also famous for the cloud tobacco. So long as it wasn't about the incident in Barren Sand City, Yi Zichen relaxed. When he remembered that Wei Jie was still waiting for him to rescue him, he couldn't afford to waste any more time. Then let's go together. There's no time to lose. Let's go now. All right. As she spoke, Murong Shui summoned the flying boat she'd borrowed from Shui Mo. She summoned the two golden flowers of the Appearance Association and boarded. Jiang Yong, Pan Sheng, and Yi Zichen boarded as well, but after they did, Shui Mo boarded as well. I want to go with you. When Jiang Yong heard this, he laughed heartily. See if I'm right? If Brother Yi wants to go, Shui Mo has to go. All right, we can be considered old teammates. Let's go then. Yi Zichen sat in a corner and took out his phone. How's the situation? The message was sent to Wei Jie. A few minutes later, Wei Jie replied. Right now, we're still hiding and can't see what's going on outside. We also don't dare to release our divine sense for fear of being discovered. I don't know what's going on either. Then who attacked your village? Asked Yi Zichen. Who knows? I haven't been on the Divine Mountains for long. Those people killed whenever they came, regardless of whether they were men or women, young or old. They didn't spare anyone. Moreover, this group of people is extremely strong. None of us are a match for them. Wei Jie replied. Are you sure they're human? Are there any other auras? Yi Zichen frowned. It's a human. I'm absolutely certain of that. When they attacked, I immediately wondered if they were outsiders, but they didn't have the slightest hint of an outsider's aura, Wei Jie replied. When he saw Wei Jie's reply, Yi Zichen couldn't help but fall silent. In fact, he still had some suspicions that the people who attacked the villages outside of Smoke Cloud City were demons. However, Wei Jie's reply was so certain that they weren't demons that he couldn't immediately make a conclusion. If it wasn't the demon race, then it had to be a very evil and wicked person to not even let off women, children, and the elderly. Could they be horse bandits? Although Yi Zichen had never run into them, he'd heard that the bandits were a particularly violent faction on the Divine Mountains. They committed all sorts of atrocities. Continue hiding. I'm heading to Smoke Cloud City now. I should be able to reach you very soon. All right. When Yi Zichen put his phone back in his pocket, he noticed that he was surrounded by a group of women. Murong Shui, the two golden flowers of the Appearance Association, and Shui Mo all bent over to look at him. Why are you guys looking at me like that? Murong Shui licked her lips uncomfortably. She frowned, took a step back, and said to Shui Mo, that communication device he used just now is pretty good. The communication device he used just now is pretty good. Instant communication. Then, Murong Shui walked over with a smile on her face. Little brother Yi, that thing you just used. What was that? Are you talking about this? Yi Zichen took out his phone. When he saw Murong Shui nod, he smiled and said, this is a mobile phone. It's a product of my research team's research and development team. It's capable of instant individual and group communication. What, are you interested? I'm rather interested, but do you know how much it costs? I'm not sure how much it costs either. I'll have to ask the research department. Once it's mass-produced, if you want it, I can add a bit of labor cost to the original price. However, I doubt it'll be more than 200 divine coins. That's fine. Murong Shui smiled and nodded. Although communication devices could send messages, they weren't always instantaneous. Sometimes, when a message was sent, there might be a long delay. Moreover, the cost of manufacturing transmission jade slips wasn't cheap. Even the cheapest one cost 500 divine coins or more. She liked the mobile phone's timeliness, and, It was cheaper than transmission jade slips. It was obvious which choice he should make. When the time comes, just give me 3 million of them. I want to give every member of the Appearance Association one, said Murong Shui heroically. Yi Zichen couldn't help but shudder in fear. If he calculated it at 200 divine coins each, then 3 million would cost 600 million divine coins. Murong Shui didn't so much as blink. No wonder the top 5 student societies were said to be rich and powerful. Only the heirs of great clans could become society leaders. He was inhumanly rich. Beauty Murong, you've really frightened me. But if you want 3 million, I don't have that much. In our first batch, we'll only be able to produce a few million. I'll need to distribute them to anti-upheaval and the factions in the lower lands. Yi Zichen shrugged. So, you have a faction in the lower lands? What gang? My family has branches in the lower lands as well. But don't you know about upheaval? That gang is really arrogant down there. They've beaten my family into a pulp. And Jiang Yong's family too. Murong Shui gestured at Jiang Yong. In response, Jiang Yong raised his voice and shouted, "That's not it. Of course not. Upheaval's too arrogant. But I can't be bothered to get involved in the side branches affairs. Still, I heard that Upheaval's doing quite well in the lower lands. They've practically taken over all 9 of the Divine Mountains." Upheaval? Doesn't that mean we, anti-upheaval, are going to wipe them out? The heirs of the northern Divine Mountains, influential clans, chatted back and forth, but Yi Zichen's expression grew increasingly stiff. He scratched his head, coughed, and shouted, "OL Jiang, how much longer until we get to Smoke City? Old Jiang, how much longer until we get to Smoke City? We'll be there soon. Don't be in such a rush. Do you know where your friend is? How about we save him first, then go harvest the cloud tobacco?" Shouted Jiang Yong. "There's no need for that. You guys go do what you need to do. I can deal with it myself. When the time comes, I'll go look for you." With that, Yi Zichen lowered his head and fell silent. Murong Shui asked, Chapter 1266. "Take this, old son." There it was again. Yi Zichen muttered inwardly, but he pretended he hadn't heard anything. He closed his eyes and didn't respond. He thought Murong Shui would give up as long as he ignored her. However, Yi Zichen had truly underestimated a woman's curiosity, even if she was a mature woman. Yi Zichen continued asking questions for 10-odd minutes, until he felt like he was about to break down. Fortunately, Jiang Yong, who was piloting the flying boat, had come to his rescue. "We've arrived at Smoke Cloud City." Yi Zichen, who'd been enduring Murong Shui's torment this entire time, shot to his feet and ran to the side of the flying ship. The first thing he did was check out Smoke City's surroundings, as well as the fluctuations of divine power and auras. The sky was blue and the water was clear. Although the divine power outside the city was more violent, there were no other auras in the city. "Then let's part ways here. When the time comes, I'll deal with the situation on my side, and then I'll come find you." Yi Zichen didn't have time to say anything else. He jumped off the flying boat. Murong Shui crossed her arms and watched Yi Zichen jump down. She couldn't help but snort. "I get it. His forces in the lower lands aren't particularly strong, and upheaval is suppressing them. He's a man, after all. Face is important. He's not willing to say it. All right, you don't have to study Brother Ye's gossip. Let's hurry and gather some cloud tobacco. Once we have 100 stalks, we'll go find Brother Yi. Perhaps he'll be of some help." Jiang Yong said. Yi Zichen landed safely on the ground, then took out his phone and searched according to the directions Wei Jie had given him. Yi Zichen hurried at top speed. In just a few minutes, he arrived at the location Wei Jie had sent him. This was indeed a village, and it looked like there were less than 50 families. As soon as they arrived at the village entrance, the pungent smell of blood assaulted their nostrils. The gravel road of the village was littered with corpses. These dead people must have experienced great fear when they were alive. After death, their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. As they walked into the village, it was just as Wei Jie had said. No one was spared, be it man or woman, young or old. Moreover, they had all died from a hole in the chest. "I'm here. Where are you?" He took out his phone and sent a message to Wei Jie. Not long after, Wei Jie replied, "We're hiding in the village's cellar." "Boss, have you dealt with the people outside?" "No, I didn't see them at all." Yi Zichen, who was looking at his phone, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He put his phone back into his pocket, while Xin Yuan's sword appeared in his hand to protect his back. Ding! A crisp sound rang out. At that moment, Yi Zichen saw at least 20 or so people with sinister smiles appear around the village. The man who attacked him with a dagger also retreated several meters away after his attack failed. "It's you guys." Yi Zichen glanced at them indifferently, then canceled the message he had already typed on his phone. Instead, he composed a new message and sent it. "Don't come out. I ran into them. I'll call you when I'm done." "Good luck, boss." Yi Zichen put his phone back into his pocket, then drew a circle in the air with Xin Yuan's sword. Countless sword shadows appeared from the circle. The sword shadows seemed to be real as they buzzed and trembled. At the same time, Yi Zichen hooked his finger towards the criminals. "Come on." With that, the surrounding criminals attacked Yi Zichen at practically the same time. Judging from the power they radiated, they were all Sky's supreme experts at the very least. Yi Zichen didn't move. His gaze flickered back and forth, and he listened carefully to their footsteps. Disperse. The illusory swords instantly dispersed, piercing through the attackers' bodies and hindering some of their movements. Yi Zichen hefted Xin Yuan's sword and charged forward. Every strike of his sword struck their vitals. It didn't matter if they were men or women. He didn't hold back at all. Yi Zichen couldn't forgive these evil people the moment they laid their hands on women and children. Cough. His sword pierced one of the attacker's chests, causing him to cough up a mouthful of blood. Yi Zichen was like a god of slaughter. He danced around the criminals, his sword rising and falling. Every time one of them died a miserable death. In less than an hour, less than a tenth of the attackers remained. Blood soaked the ground, making the stench of blood even stronger. However, Yi Zichen's white robes weren't stained in the slightest. His white robes were whiter than snow. Not a single drop. Clap, clap, clap. At that moment, the crisp sound of applause came from behind Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen turned around and saw a bald man with tattoos all over his face. Behind him were dozens of people bound up. Wei Jie was among those who had been tied up. Yi Zichen's eyelids fluttered inexplicably, but he composed himself and looked calmly at the bald man. "Who the hell are you? Bandits? Haven't you heard of us?" The bald man grinned, revealing his pearly white teeth. He licked his lips. "Little brother, you're quite capable. You actually killed so many of my subordinates. Shouldn't you compensate me?" "Compensate? All of your subordinates deserve to die, including you." Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes. Oh. The bald man feigned panic and hugged his shoulders, then kicked Wei Jie and the others to the ground. "Then how about we have a little competition? Let's see if you kill me faster or if I kill them faster." Wei Jie didn't say anything to Yi Zichen. He knew very well that if he called Yi Zichen boss, Yi Zichen would be forced into a passive position. It was as if he didn't recognize Yi Zichen at all. He knelt on the ground, glaring, and the others did the same. In contrast, it was the villagers who were begging for mercy and shouting that they didn't want to die. Yi Zichen's heart was heavy. He knew every single one of these people alive. Wei Jie, Yuan Hua, Yu Zhilan. These were all former members of Upheaval's management. Compete with the bald man in speed and blade techniques? What if Wei Jie and the others killed him? He couldn't afford to compete with them in blade techniques. "Fine, you win. Tell me, what compensation do you want? So long as you don't kill these people, I can satisfy any of your demands," said Yi Zichen. "Isn't that right? We bandits seek money. That sword in your hands looks pretty good. How about, give it to me?" The bald man's eyes flashed with greed. Yi Zichen didn't know why, but he got the feeling that. He recognized the Xin Yuan sword. "That's impossible." Yi Zichen shook his head. "Then do you want them dead?" The bald man accurately placed his blade against Wei Jie and the others' necks. Yi Zichen was even more certain that the bald man knew who he was. "Tell me, who exactly are you?" Yi Zichen's gaze darkened, but the bald man's smile remained the same. "Don't worry about me. Just give me your sword." However, just as the bald man thought victory was within his grasp, a golden figure descended from the heavens. Suddenly, A golden figure descended from the sky, carrying a staff. Then, Yi Zichen heard a familiar roar. Chapter 1267. The great sage returns. Yi Zichen stood in front of the bald man. He looked up into the sky. That familiar roar couldn't possibly have come from anyone else. He was the great sage equal to heaven, Sun Wukong. His golden staff tore through the sky, carrying with it the might of an army. As the rolling shadow descended, the bald man's pupil shrank. Iron rings appeared on his arms and blocked the falling rod. He flipped to the side several dozen meters away, then stared intently at the great sage's descending figure. It really was the great sage. Yi Zichen's eyes moistened, but he found it hard to disguise his joy. Back when the demons invaded, the great sage had nearly been beaten to the brink of death. In the end, his master rescued him, and he'd gone missing ever since. 100 years later, he'd reappeared with the Rui Jingu Bang in hand. He was just as awe-inspiring as ever. "Brother, long time no see." The great sage grinned, then pointed at Wei Jie and the others. "I'll leave these people to you. Leave that demon scum to me. I've been cultivating for 100 years, but I feel like my bones are about to freeze." As the sound of his voice faded, the great sage cudgel in his hand pointed forward. "Yao, where do you think you're going?" "A demon." When he heard the great sage identify the bald man, Yi Zichen was stunned despite himself. Was the bald man a demon? He instinctively checked the bald man's aura, but there wasn't the slightest hint of demonic aura emanating from him. Next, he used his fiery eyes of truth to determine the bald man's identity. Still, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, the great sage was still chasing after the bald man. Based on how he'd swung his staff, Yi Zichen could tell that he was at least a 9th-stage Sky Supreme. Dealing with the demon shouldn't be too much of a problem. Yi Zichen decided not to chase after him. He left the bald man entirely to the great sage. Once the great sage returned, he'd ask him about the bald man's identity. He walked up to Wei Jie and the others. Wei Jie and the others were tied up in ropes similar to immortal binding ropes. After the ropes were untied, the villagers who were still alive expressed their gratitude. However, their expressions didn't show much happiness after surviving a disaster. Instead, they looked at the dead people in the village in a daze. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't. Yi Zichen looked at the villagers and sighed. Their families were definitely among the dead, and the river Styx could indeed bring them back to life. However, he couldn't help them beg Emperor Hades to revive them. The dead were gone. Yi Zichen could only hope that they would be able to walk out of the shadows soon. Yi Zichen retracted his gaze, then looked at Wei Jie and the others. "Are you guys all right?" "We're all fine. Fortunately, you came in time. Otherwise, we might have all died here." Wei Jie grinned. Upheaval's executives at his side looked even more fearful than before. The Divine Mountain was simply too dangerous. They were starting to regret their decision. It would have been better if they had stayed below. "When I left the Divine Mountains, you were all sky immortals. How come you've all undergone your divine tribulations in less than half a year?" asked Yi Zichen. "It's a long story." Wei Jie explained to Yi Zichen how they'd managed to get here so quickly. A few months ago, Upheaval had discovered a new secret realm. This new secret realm was filled with boundless opportunities, but it was also bound to be filled with countless dangers. In order to ensure their members' safety, Wei Jie had led the higher-ups of the gang to set an example and brave the minds. Unexpectedly, not only had they failed, but they'd also benefited tremendously. Their strength had increased by leaps and bounds. In less than half a month, they'd become peak immortal kings and undergone their divine tribulations. "You guys are pretty lucky." Yi Zichen nodded. "After that, we stayed in the Divine Mountains for a while longer. We took care of the gang's internal affairs, then ascended. Coincidentally, the Divine Mountain we came from was the Northern Divine Mountain as well." Wei Jie chuckled. "If we came to the Northern Divine Mountain, then of course we had to seek shelter with you, boss. However, you didn't reply to me at first, so we found a village to settle down in." The others nodded calmly. Then Wei Jie furrowed his brows. "But boss, the Yao brother just now was your friend, wasn't he?" Why did he say that Baldy was a demon? None of us sensed any demonic aura from him. It wasn't just you. I didn't sense anything either. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes. But since the great sage says he's a demon, he naturally has his reasons. We'll just have to wait until he gets back to ask him. Speak of the devil. As soon as Zichen said he'd wait for the great sage to return, the great sage picked up the half-dead Baldy and slowly walked towards them. The great sage strode like a dragon or a tiger, looking like he was returning triumphantly. When he reached Yi Zichen, the great sage casually tossed the Baldy to the ground. Brother, how should we deal with this demon? I'm new here, so I don't know much about this place. You decide. After 100 years, the great sage seemed much more reserved. Just now he'd said, I'm new here, so I don't know much about this place, and he'd left the Baldy to Yi Zichen. It was clear that although the great sage's spirit hadn't waned, he'd learned to restrain himself. Even now, the great sage still said the Baldy was a demon. Great sage, you're saying this Baldy is a demon? Yi Zichen arched his brows. That's right, he's a demon. You can't tell, can you? This bastard's hiding his aura really well. If not for my fiery eyes of truth, I really wouldn't have been able to tell. The great sage kicked the Baldy viciously. Then his eyes flashed with golden light. When the golden light shone on the Baldy's body, the originally human-like Baldy transformed into a demon in the blink of an eye. At the same time, a pungent purple gas was released from his body. He really is a demon. Wei Jie jumped in fright. Yi Zichen knit his brows as well. He looked at the bald man, who'd reverted to his true form, and fell silent. Fortunately, the great sage was here. If it weren't for him, Yi Zichen really would have mistaken him for a bandit. Great sage, look at those who have already died. Aren't they all from the devil race? When the great sage heard this, he looked over at the dead bandits. When the great sage's eyes of fire and gold shone on them, the bandits all turned into demons. They're all demons, snorted the great sage. When he saw this, Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. He glanced at the still-living Baldy and snorted. You demons really are getting better and better. You're even using techniques like hiding your auras and pretending to be humans. At that moment, a flying boat flew past the village. It was Shui Mo and the others. Brother Yi, your side. As soon as the boat arrived, they heard Jiang Yang's loud voice. However, before he could finish his words, he was startled. Then, he jumped off the flying boat. Chapter 1268. A famous person of the lower realms, the rest of the people on the flying boat also landed. When they saw the demon corpses all over the ground and the bald man lying on the ground who was already on the verge of death, their eyes revealed faint shock. How come there are so many demons here? Shui Mo covered her mouth in astonishment. After the incident at Barren Sand City, the Divine Mountains have raised their guard against demons countless times over. How could they still get in? But you saw it for yourself. They still managed to get in. Yi Zichen sighed and shrugged. Did you guys finish harvesting the cloud tobacco? The cloud tobacco covered a pretty wide area, and quite a few people went there to harvest it. We told them Skyspan Academy had sent us, and that we'd only picked 100 stalks. The guards of Smoke Cloud City gave us 100 of them and let us leave. Shui Mo pursed her lips. Murong Shui crossed her arms and circled the demons. Let's hand them over to the academy. That's what I was thinking. Yi Zichen nodded. You didn't get here from the start. These demons can hide their auras and disguise themselves as humans. Outsiders won't be able to detect them at all. If we hand them over to the academy, they might be able to make some breakthroughs. Are all demons like this now? Jiang Yong couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps because the Baldy had overheard their conversation, he was worried that they'd see through their concealment techniques. So he tried to reverse the flow of his demonic energy and self-destruct. Behave yourself, old Sunday, with a bang. He struck the Baldy with his staff, scattering the Baldy's reversed demonic energy. At the same time, it sealed off his demonic sea, making it impossible for him to circulate his demonic energy. In truth, they'd noticed the great sage's arrival from the start. Although he was a Yao, Yi Zichen had recruited quite a few 9-stage Sky Supremes to help him deal with the subterranean beasts. They instinctively assumed it was the great sage and his pack of Yao. However, when the great sage attacked, Jiang Yong's eyes flashed, and he took a few steps forward. That's the divine sea calming rod, isn't it? Jiang Yong stared wide-eyed at the great sage's golden banded staff. When Murong Shui heard the commotion, she hurried over, scooted up to the great sage, and looked him up and down. It looks like it really is the divine sea calming rod, the 9th-ranked divine artifact on the divine artifact rankings. Murong Shui bit her lip as she spoke, then continued. Didn't they say the divine sea calming rod was in the eastern sea in the lower realms? You can't be the great sage, equal to heaven, Sun Wukong, right? That's me, old son. The great sage slammed his rod into the ground and said proudly, Great! I can't believe I'm seeing the great sage Su. As, Shun, long sage you divine king man, eyes is as I can as, murmurong long as he was, as she could. The great sage's face turned green, but he never hit women or children with his rod. Even if he was unhappy, he could only endure it. As Yisu as ye as he as san as he as ye he shung long as su he Yuri demon sage long sect as well as sage sect. One of them is the victorious fighting Buddha, Sun Wukong. He's famous because of his birth. He's a supreme divine beast of the monkey clan. Heaven nurtured him, and the Yao view him with great importance. That's why he's famous on the divine mountains. The second is the Sioux sisters of the nine-tailed fox clan. They're all descendants of the nine-tailed fox clan, and their bloodlines are extremely pure. However, the main reason they're so famous on the divine mountains is because of the Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor is the most famous of the divine mountains. He's a human, and he has the #1 divine artifact of the primordial era, the Xinyuan sword. However, he's famous mainly because he disobeyed the divine mountain's decrees. In the end, the shamans and gods forced him to reincarnate. Back then, news of this spread like wildfire. Yi Zichen couldn't help but tense up. Wasn't the Yellow Emperor talking about him? You know so much. Could it be that you were around back then? Asked Yi Zichen tentatively. What are you thinking? Shui Mo was speechless. I was born less than 100 years ago. How could I have been around back then? If I had been around back then, would I still be a Sky Supreme now? Of course I heard that. It's true. Shui Mo glared at Yi Zichen, then said, I don't know where the Yellow Emperor went. He's been my idol since I was a child. He's not afraid of power, and even when the shamans and gods threatened him, he refused to compromise. Instead, he chose to reincarnate. He's so cool. Your idol is right in front of you, muttered Yi Zichen inwardly, but he didn't say it aloud. Bro, can you keep that woman away from me? I can't hold back any longer. I'm about to swing my staff at her. The great sage's transmission suddenly appeared in Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness. Only then did he see the great sage's livid expression. His furry face was already beginning to betray his impatience. His arm gripped the Rui Jingu Bang tightly, so tightly that his veins could be seen. Great sage, please calm down. Yi Zichen calmed the great sage's irritation, walked up to Murong Shui and Jiang Yong, and pulled them away. I can understand how you feel when you see your idol, but shouldn't we hurry back to the academy? No matter how I look at this demon, he doesn't look like he's going to die. Only now did Jiang Yong remember that he still had demons to send to the Institute. He nodded. All right, then let's go back. The great sage should be coming with us, right? Of course, he's my brother. Before Yi Zichen even finished speaking, the great sage transmitted to him. Naturally, they didn't want to travel with Jiang Yong and the others. Yi Zichen gave the great sage a reassuring look, then grabbed the bald man by the collar and tossed him onto the flying boat. The corpses of the demons on the ground were also thrown onto the flying boat. Yi Zichen called for everyone to board, then tossed the token hanging from his waist into the villagers' hands. You could go to Smoke City and ask for help. I'll give you this medallion. If the city lord asks who sent you, tell him it was Skyspan Academy. The flying boat slowly rose into the air. Jiang Yong steered it toward the academy, while the great sage and Yi Zichen sat in a corner. Bro, you're really lucky with women. You've got so many beautiful girls by your side. I just used my fiery eyes of truth to take a look. They're all original. Yi Zichen was speechless that the great sage would use his fiery eyes of truth on him. Chapter 1269. The Return Ambush. What do you mean you can't tell? These girls are all natural? The great sage half-squatted and rested one arm on his knee like a rascal. His fiery eyes shone brightly as he scratched his head with his left hand. That's impossible. You've learned 30% of my fiery eyes of truth. If you can't tell, you're an embarrassment to my fiery eyes of truth. For some reason, Yi Zichen regretted bringing the great sage around the modern realm. He developed this habit back then. Back then, the two of them didn't do much other than crouch on the streets and watch the girls pass by. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the demons. Yi Zichen sighed, then turned to the great sage. I used my fiery eyes of truth to identify them, but I couldn't see their true forms at all. Perhaps it's because your fiery eyes of truth haven't reached perfection yet. As he spoke, the great sage pulled out a secret manual from somewhere and placed it in Yi Zichen's hands. We're brothers and sisters. Here's the rest of the Fiery Eyes of Truth manual. The Fiery Eyes of Truth were definitely the great sage's specialty, but the fact that he'd handed over the entire manual to Yi Zichen without the slightest hesitation showed just how deep their friendship was. Yi Zichen patted the great sage's shoulder, and the great sage grinned. At that moment, Murong Shui and the others arrived. Monkey! Murong Shui ran over, giggling. When he saw her, the great sage seemed somewhat afraid. He instinctively scooted closer to Yi Zichen, not wanting to get too close to Murong Shui. This was the first time Yi Zichen had seen the great sage scared. What are you running for? It's not like I'm going to eat you. Murong Shui pursed her lips, and her eyes flashed with displeasure. How boring. All right, don't be afraid. In the future, even if you wanted to come looking for you, I won't. As soon as she finished speaking, her gaze fell on Wei Jie and the others. Upheaval's members were gathered in twos and threes. For some reason, they sensed something amiss. Then they saw Murong Shui smile and approach them. Your platoon leader Ye's friends, right? Regiment Commander Yi? Wei Jie and the others were stunned, but they quickly understood that the platoon commander Yi she was referring to was undoubtedly Yi Zichen. After hesitating for a while, Wei Jie nodded. When Murong Shui saw this, a faint smile appeared on her face. She moved closer mysteriously. I heard that Commander Yi has a faction under the Sacred Mountain. What faction is it? All right, it had been so long, but Murong Shui's gossipy soul had yet to be extinguished. At the mention of the lower lands, Wei Jie and the others couldn't help but reveal proud expressions. We are chaos. What nonsense are you spouting? Before he'd even finished speaking, Yi Zichen covered Wei Jie's mouth and glared at him. You're just a subordinate faction of upheaval. What's there to say? Yi Zichen looked at Murong Shui speechlessly. To tell you the truth, we're actually upheaval's subordinate faction. But don't blame me. Upheaval really is powerful in the lower lands. For the sake of survival, we have to rely on them. I didn't tell you before because you said you didn't get along with Upheaval. I was afraid you'd hate us for being a small faction, so I didn't tell you. See if I'm telling the truth. When Murong Shui heard that, she turned to the two golden flowers and laughed heartily. She even extended her hand. Before long, the Appearance Association's golden flowers and Shui Mo took out 2 bags of coins and reluctantly tossed them into Murong Shui's hands. No wonder Murong Shui and the others kept asking. They've been making a bet. Murong Shui laughed triumphantly in front of Shui Mo and the others. Yi Zichen took this opportunity to glare viciously at Wei Jie and the others. If he'd come out in time, they would have been exposed. Wei Jie and the others understood. They'd almost said the wrong thing just now. Suddenly, the flying boat that was tearing through the sky slowly came to a stop. Everyone on the airship turned to look at Jiang Yong. Pan Sheng was already setting up a spirit formation around the airship. Murong Shui, who'd won the bet, glanced up ahead. "What is it? There seems to be something up ahead." Jiang Yong, who was piloting the ship, stared intently ahead. Yizichin took a few steps forward, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. "Great Sage." Jiang Yong called the Great Sage over. The Great Sage's eyes flashed with golden light as he looked ahead. After a few breaths of time, the Great Sage's pupils constricted. "Retreat." Jiang Yong didn't doubt him. He immediately piloted the ship backward. Not long after they flew out, dozens of figures soared into the sky from the original flying ship. Behind them was a chaos that was 1,000 feet wide, and there seemed to be a person sitting in that chaos. Are they demons? Yizichin's fiery eyes couldn't discern the attackers' true identities, but given that they'd ambushed them, there was an 80% chance they were demons. As expected, when Yizichin asked, the Great Sage nodded solemnly. Everyone's hearts went cold. Being able to fly meant they had a certain level of understanding of heaven and earth. They were at least 7-stage Sky Supremes. From the looks of it, there were around 40 of them, and only 8 of them were 7th-stage or higher. "How far are we from Skyspan City?" asked Yizichin. "We're close. If we fly at top speed, we'll be there in a dozen or so minutes." Jiang Yong furrowed his brows. At that moment, the retreating ship seemed to bump into something. When they looked back, they didn't see any ancient mountains or trees. Pan Sheng. He glanced at Pan Sheng, who reached out and placed his hand on the barrier, only to shake his head. "Can't you break it?" asked Jiang Yong. "I can, but I'll need a lot of time to analyze the formation structure, as well as where the formation's eyes and foundation stones are. By the time I find them, the demons up ahead will have long since caught up." Pan Sheng's gaze was solemn. Everyone's expressions were unsightly. Shui Mo spoke up as well. "Doesn't that mean we can only charge out from the front?" "I'm afraid that's impossible." Pan Sheng was a formation master himself. He really wanted to give them hope, but from a professional standpoint, he had no choice but to give them the truest answer. It was also the one they didn't want to hear. A formation can't just seal off one direction. Right now, we're completely trapped here. There's no way out. Chapter 1270. The Great Sage's Display of Might. Is that all we can do? Jiang Yong stared intently at Pan Sheng. Given the situation they'd just witnessed, if they wanted to capture the person who'd set up the formation, they'd have to face off against a few dozen experts at the same cultivation level as them. That was simply a fool's dream. "Of course there's another way, which is to use brute force to break the formation," said Pan Sheng, listing yet another method none of them could pull off. If they could really break the spirit array, then they wouldn't have retreated when they faced the devil race. "I really don't understand what you're worried about." At this moment, the Great Sage, who had taken out the Rui Jingu Bang, laughed arrogantly. His fiery eyes burned with the desire to fight. "Just fight them. If you want to fight, then I'll fight." His simple, crude answer was like a shot in the arm. Everyone felt a jolt of adrenaline. Murong Shui narrowed her eyes and snorted. "Who says we're not? Just fight them." "Jiang Yong, you're really embarrassing. You're just trapped inside. Look at how scared you look." "Who's scared? Who's scared?" Jiang Yong was so angry he hefted his axe. "They're just a few demon scum. Watch as I chop off their heads with my axe." The Great Sage's battle intent seemed to ignite. The others, who'd just been scowling miserably, looked at him with sharp, piercing gazes. Yizichin couldn't help but chuckle. They needed an existence like the Great Sage right now. Otherwise, before they even started fighting, their morale had already dropped by 30%. If they really started fighting, the result would be obvious. "Damn it, a bunch of demon brats. Let's go back and F***CK them up." The irascible Jiang Yong steered the flying boat forward. When it returned to its original position, the demons hadn't moved at all. It was as if they were waiting for Yizichin and the others to return. "You're back. And here I thought you'd be too scared to come back." Amused laughter could be heard from the chaotic void up ahead. Jiang Yong relinquished control of the airship and walked up to it with his axe in hand, snorting coldly. "Who the hell are you?" Jiang Yong knit his brows and looked ahead. The chaotic figure laughed coldly. "You don't need to know." Before he finished speaking, everyone saw a shadow pressing down on them. Everyone on the flying ship immediately drew their weapons, and the great sage, wielding the Rui Jingu Bang, took the lead. "Eat my staff." The rod smashed heavily against the illusory figure, but when the rod landed, the illusory figure was directly split into two. It didn't take long for them to completely merge together, and they continued to approach the flying boat. "Get out of the way." On the flying vessel, Murong Shui roared. As she moved, a wave of fire swept across the sky. The golden flowers of the Appearance Association stood on either side of her, fanning the flames. The flames burned the entire sky into a fiery red. When the illusory figure saw the waves of fire, it paused for a moment. The moment the phantom stopped, the devils in front also rushed over, as if they had received some kind of order. "You still dare to come?" Jiang Yong rubbed his chin, then gripped his battle axe with both hands and charged straight at them. The great sage chuckled, and the Rui Jingu Bang in his hand grew dozens of times larger. Countless illusory staffs filled the sky, slamming into the demons like a wave. To their surprise, however, the demons didn't fight back at all. Even when Jiang Yong's battle axe and the great sage's staff slammed into them, they didn't resist at all. Instead, they charged straight for the flying boat. Yi Zichen, who was still on the flying boat, couldn't help but knit his brows. Then he glanced at the demons behind him. Their targets are the demons. As expected, both the illusory figure in the sky and the demons up ahead ran madly for the flying boat. Their goal was to take the demons on board back with them. "Take them all back," roared the illusory figure in the sky. When Yi Zichen suggested that the demons wanted to take the demons off the flying boat, Pan Sheng had already set up seals around them. However, those demons had sacrificed their lives in exchange for the absolute speed of the flying boat. As a result, before he could even set up his seals, the demons had already boarded the boat. Dozens of 7-stage Sky Supremes and above boarded the boat. Even if Yi Zichen and the others resisted with all their might, they were still outnumbered. In the blink of an eye, the demons had already captured several prisoners. They absolutely couldn't let them take them back. Their aura concealment techniques and their ability to transform into humans were all dependent on the Divine Mountain's ability to find a countermeasure. Yi Zichen was just about to open the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and collect the remaining demons, but at that moment, "Don't even think of leaving, you monsters!" The great sage holding the golden cudgel turned into a golden light, and the cudgel in his hand slammed on the head of the devil. In an instant, the head of the demon who tried to take the captives exploded. He fell to the ground dead. The great sage's Rui Golden hoop slammed relentlessly into the demons. When the staff fell, they died. His subordinates' tragic deaths infuriated the illusory figure in the sky. He realized that if they wanted to take the captives away, their only option was to kill the great sage and Yi Zichen. "Kill him!" With a shrill cry, the demons gave up on the captives and charged at the great sage. Just in time, the great sage grinned, then tossed the Rui Jingu Bang high into the sky. Instantly, it split into countless staffs. At the same time, the great sage transformed into countless shadows that grabbed the staffs in the sky and swung them at the demons. Boom, 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 boom. Yi Zichen and the others didn't even need to do anything. The great sage wiped out all the demons on his own. Once the demons were dealt with, the great sage's clones returned to his body. He stood majestically in the sky, Rui Jingu Bang in hand. "That monkey's really fierce." Murong Shui and the others couldn't help but sigh in amazement, but at that moment, that's right, all of a sudden, a low voice rang out in everyone's ears. When they looked up, they saw that the entire void seemed to have been torn apart by someone. A pair of large hands reached out from the crack and grabbed the first illusory figure. It even seized the opportunity to take away all the demons on the flying boat, including the ones who had been killed by the great sage. When the awe-inspiring great sage saw this, he somersaulted and followed. He swung his staff viciously, but the other party simply flicked his fingers. Whoosh! The great sage retreated at top speed. The Rui Jingu Bang instantly lengthened and stabbed into the ground to slow his retreat. Even so, he still managed to drag out a 1,000-meter-long line on the ground before he was able to stabilize himself. Not bad at all. Another low growl came from the sky, followed by a snort. "Who are you?" The great sage narrowed his eyes, returned his staff to its normal size, and propped it against the sky. Chapter 1271. Emperor, you everyone aboard the flying vessel was infected by the great sage's heroic spirit. Even if the thing in the rift was something they couldn't possibly stand up to, they still couldn't. In the face of that existence, all of them, including the great sage, were as insignificant as ants. But when the great sage straightened his back and called out his name like a god equal to the heavens, then looked fearlessly at the rift, anyone would be moved by this. "What's your relationship with Patriarch Subhoodie?" Voices drifted through the rift from all directions. When Yizichin heard this, he was stunned. Wasn't Patriarch Subhoodie the great sage's master? Why would this devil suddenly bring this up? However, if he asked this, wouldn't it mean that he was actually a bit afraid of Patriarch Subhoodie and didn't dare to act rashly against the great sage? It seemed that even in the divine, Yao, and demon realms, this ancestral master was an incredible existence. When the demon mentioned Patriarch Subhoodie, a hint of astonishment flashed through the great sage's eyes. However, in the blink of an eye, he composed himself. "I don't know him." Yizichin wasn't all that surprised by the great sage's answer. Patriarch Subhoodie had said clearly that he couldn't speak his name in public. He respected his master's wishes, so there was nothing wrong with him saying this. "Then who did you learn that myriad Buddhas greeting the sect from?" "I, O.L. son, was born of heaven and earth. No matter what I do, I'm self-taught. Do you dare come out and meet me?" The great sage roared at the sky, then straightened his neck and stared intently at the rift in the sky. "This is the God realm, so it's not convenient for me to show myself. But if you want to see me, I can come out and meet you. There's no harm in that." As soon as he said this, everyone on the flying vessel turned to look at the rift. Then they saw that the rift, which was only a few 100 feet wide, instantly split into 100 feet. Through the rift, they saw a pitch-black background. However, within the darkness, they seemed to see countless eyes glowing with purple light, staring intently at the land below. A graceful, purple-robed, middle-aged man stepped out of the rift. He wasn't as ugly as demons. In fact, he was quite handsome. Her pupils were pure black with a tinge of purple. Above her long eyelashes were thick, ink-like eyebrows that almost crossed each other. His jet-black hair almost reached his waist. His arms were white, and his fingers were long and slender. He even held a black crystal ball in his hand. However, the moment he appeared, an overwhelming amount of demonic chi corroded the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the area within 1,000 feet of him was filled with a dense purple aura. "Who dares to cause trouble in my heavenly reaching realm?" Almost at the same time as this almighty devil appeared, a long cry that shook the 9 heavens resounded in the distant sky-piercing city. With a flash of light, a middle-aged man clad in golden armor appeared before them. This person's eyes were like a tiger's, and he had the air of a great general. His whole body exuded an upright and plain-spoken aura, which was completely different from the feeling that the devil race almighty gave off. When the two of them stood together, it was like a meeting between good and evil. When the golden-armored man appeared, the devilish expert sighed. "I knew it wouldn't be convenient for me to come out here. Emperor, you dare to enter my heavenly connection realm so brazenly? What, can the demons no longer bear the loneliness?" muttered the golden-armored man. "Don't misunderstand. I've never thought about entering Skyspan City, where you, Wei Di, are stationed. Even if I really wanted to enter your divine mountains, I'd have to pick a pushover first, wouldn't I?" The middle-aged man smiled calmly, his smile filled with kindness. "I'm only here because some disappointing brat of my clan needed my help to clean up the mess. Since you've come out, I won't disturb you any longer. I don't want you to suspect my intentions." He smiled faintly at the golden-armored, middle-aged man in the sky, then retreated back into the rift. However, before he left, he unintentionally glanced at the great sage. The rift closed, and the demonic chi that filled the sky dissipated like smoke. The middle-aged man still stood in the sky, staring intently at the rift. He couldn't help but sigh softly. His vigilance was too low. Emperor Yu had undoubtedly appeared in Skyspan City for some time, but he'd only just discovered him. Right now, the relationship between the upper three realms was extremely tense. He absolutely couldn't afford to reveal anything during this time. You're students of Skyspan Academy, right? Hurry up and go back. Wei Di called out to Yi Zichen, then spread out his divine awareness and dashed off into the distance. This rift had to have been set up in advance. Otherwise, there was no way he wouldn't have sensed it. There had to be more than one rift like this. He had to take advantage of this time to destroy them all. Otherwise, once the two realms truly started fighting, the rift would be a gateway for the demon army to march straight through. Let's go back to. Yi Zichen watched the golden-armored man leave, then turned to the others on the flying ship. The two experts' confrontation left everyone on the flying ship unable to calm down. Even Murong Shui put away her gossipy enthusiasm and stood at the edge of the ship, whispering to the Appearance Association's Golden Flower. Pan Sheng seemed to be in deep shock as well. He sat cross-legged beside Jiang Yong, who was piloting the ship. Shui Mo's expression was unsightly, but at that moment, the great sage leaned over. Do you know who that golden-armored man and that person in front of the rift were? His question was obviously directed at Yi Zichen and Shui Mo. There was no need to mention Yi Zichen. He'd only just arrived. He was like a blank sheet of paper. Shui Mo took a deep breath and said, Wei Di, Skyspan City's General of Defense. Wei Di, Skysplit City's General, and also the #1 person in Skysplit City. As for that demon expert, Emperor Yu. Shui Mo let out another sigh, her expression grave. If I remember correctly, Emperor Yu should be the 9th of the Demon Emperor's 12 Demon Emperors. Emperor Yu. Any one of the Demon Emperor's emperors could rival the 9 Divine Mountain Emperors. Just now, I broke out in a cold sweat because I was worried he'd fight Wei Di. If the two of them fought, Wei Di might not be his match. That's right. The great sage scratched his head. Fortunately, I didn't fight him. That's right. It's a good thing you didn't. Otherwise, Yi Zichen would be on his way to the river Styx to fish you out. Shui Mo wanted to crack a joke, but her heavy heart made her joke strangely serious. Murong Shui and the others walked over. It seemed they knew Emperor Yu's identity, and their expressions were unsightly. The demons can enter and leave the divine mountains as they please. Everyone nodded. Shui Mo couldn't help but grit her teeth. More importantly, the demons took all of our captives back. If we don't figure out how they hide their auras and bodies, we'll be in an even more passive position. Chapter 1272. Upheaval Management Group. Go ahead and hand these demons over to the Academy. Yi Zichen led the demons to Shui Mo and the others. The great sage, Wei Jie, and the others stood behind him. Aren't you coming with us? As soon as he said that, Shui Mo glanced at the people behind him and couldn't help but laugh. All right, then go ahead. Leave these to us, but don't come back too late. I know. After watching Shui Mo and the others leave with the demons, the great sage immediately winked at Yi Zichen. You're still trying to say it's fine? She told you not to come back too late. Wei Jie and the others inwardly gave Yi Zichen a thumbs up. They knew that in the lower lands, their boss still had a beautiful wife. Now that he was on the Divine Mountains, he still wasn't willing to be lonely. When he saw their expressions, Yi Zichen was speechless. Can you guys stop overthinking things? Shui Mo and I are brothers. She told me not to come back too late because there's a student society ranking competition. She's afraid I won't be able to participate. The great sage and the others still didn't believe him, but Yi Zichen couldn't be bothered to explain. Hurry up and go. I'll find you a place to stay. Yi Zichen had been in Skyspan City for so long, but he'd only been to the city a few times. While looking for a place to stay for the great sage and the others, Yi Zichen took a stroll around the city. To tell the truth, it was an eye-opener. In this city, apart from some of the city's specialties, there was almost nothing that one couldn't buy even if they wanted to. Yi Zichen even saw quite a few Yao servants on the way. Furthermore, some of them were Sky Supremes and above. There were also quite a few street vendors selling strange trinkets. Yi Zichen couldn't resist his curiosity and bought quite a few. After a few twists and turns, Yi Zichen chose a medium-sized inn for the Great Sage and the others. There were 3 rooms, one for the Great Sage. The Great Sage had requested this of his own accord, saying he was afraid of strangers. Wei Jie and Yu Zhilan shared a room. They were husband and wife, so they needed a little nightlife. Sharing a room with others wasn't particularly convenient. As for the others, they shared a room. That way, they could take care of each other. After checking out his own room, Yi Zichen called them to the 3rd room. "Thank you, boss." As soon as they entered, Upheaval's higher-ups cupped their hands and thanked Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen gestured for them to sit down, then took out his phone. "Who hasn't added me yet? Hurry up and do it now. Don't rely on Wei Jie to find me. You guys can't always be together." Everyone took out their phones to add Yi Zichen as a friend. At this moment, the Great Sage came over. "Isn't this?" exclaimed the Great Sage, wide-eyed. When he saw his astonished expression, Yi Zichen couldn't help but chuckle. "Exactly. Can it be used in the God Realm?" As he spoke, the Great Sage pulled out a phone from somewhere and turned it on with practiced ease. Before long, his phone started ringing nonstop. The Great Sage looked at the endless stream of messages on his phone and pointed at the screen, speechless for a long time. "I've brought the people from the Heavenly Court and the Underworld to the God Realm. Now, the information network in the God Realm is completely set up, and we can even contact the people below." "Are you serious?" With that, the Great Sage dived into the Red Packet server. He didn't know if he was nervous or something, but his hands trembled as he typed. "Monkey King, I old son am here." This message was like a nuclear bomb exploding in the chat group. The previously bustling chat group instantly fell silent. In fact, the silence was even more severe than when Tai Bai Jinxing had appeared. "God of Thunder, Great Sage?" The first message to appear was from the God of Thunder. "God of Thunder, Great Sage, you're not dead? Neza, Great Sage, you're still alive? Pagoda bearing Heavenly Kingly, are you still alive? Yulao, am I seeing things? Why did the Great Sage send a message just now?" Everyone in the group gasped in shock at the Great Sage's appearance. This wasn't their fault. When the demons invaded, everyone thought the Great Sage had died. Furthermore, they hadn't heard any news of him in the past 100 years. Just like Yi Zichen, they all thought he and the Great Sage had died in the demons' invasion. Those who'd once been on good terms with Yi Zichen and the Great Sage in the Heavenly Court and the Underworld were in low spirits. It wasn't until Yi Zichen appeared that they were astonished. Now that the Great Sage had appeared, "Monkey King, Tui Tui, I, Lai Sun, am still alive and well." "What do you mean he died?" "Monkey King, don't you know that I have 72 transformations? That means I have 72 lives. God of Fortune, it's great that the Great Sage is still alive." Everyone in the group cheered. The Great Sage laughed heartily as he sat to the side and chatted with the others. Yi Zichen looked around for a while longer, then exited the chat. He clicked on his contacts and saw that Yuan Hua and the others had already added him as a friend. After confirming their requests, Yi Zichen pulled up a new chat group. Group name, Upheaval Management Group. Yi Zichen, talk in the group. Wei Jie, here. Yu Zhilan here. Yuan Hua here. After confirming that everyone was in the group, Yi Zichen put away his phone and said, "From now on, if you have any problems, discuss them directly in this group. In the future, if you have any problems, you could discuss them directly in this group. This group is for our future executives. You could discuss all matters big or small in this group. If you have something you want to report to me in private, just click on my profile picture and send me a private message." "Understood." Wei Jie and the others nodded one after the other. Yi Zichen continued, "You guys should know how to create groups, right? Once cell phones become more common, you can add all of our members to the group. Of course, you can't add them all to the same group. You'll need a few hundred people to create separate groups to manage. The group leader will create a group, and then the group leader's group leader will create a group to manage the group. Do you understand?" Everyone nodded. Yuan Hua was the only one who hadn't quite caught on, perhaps because of his age. Wei Jie smacked him on the back. "I'll explain it to you in detail in a bit. Yuan Huan nodded in a daze. Yi Zichen took out his phone. Before long, a red packet appeared on his screen. The phones of the surrounding executives all rang. Wei Jie was the first to take out his phone and click on the red packet. When he opened the red envelope, he was in a daze. Boss! Wei Jie's jaw dropped for a long time, but he couldn't speak. The red packet he'd just received was probably worth more than 1 billion yuan. The others also clicked on red packets, but there was only one. None of them received it. They all turned to look at Wei Jie. When they saw the scrolling notifications, they were dumbfounded. This is the startup capital I'm giving you. Chapter 1273. Demon Dharma Body Complete. Yi Zichen had long since planned to establish upheaval on the Divine Mountains. He couldn't avoid a battle with the Shao family. If he wanted to shake up such a colossus, he had to take things one step at a time. As he looked at the resources on his phone, Wei Jie's heart burned with passion. Yu Zhilan and the others had only just ascended the Divine Mountains, so they probably didn't have a clear understanding of the value of these resources. But he was someone from the Divine Mountains. He'd been banished from the Divine Mountains to the lower lands. He had a basic understanding of the Divine Mountains, so he understood what these resources represented. So long as they had at least a few Sky Supremes among them, they could rely on these resources to establish a mid-level faction. But the problem they faced was that they didn't have any Sky Supremes. Wei Jie and the others were only Earth Supremes. Yi Zichen was the only Sky Supreme they had. However, judging from his words and actions, he most likely wouldn't interfere with the establishment of the gang. That meant they had no one capable of threatening him. With just a handful of Earth Supremes and so many resources, let alone establishing upheaval, they couldn't even begin. Just holding it like that made him shudder with fear. These were resources worth more than 1 billion Shinbi. Even diviners would covet them. Boss, Wei Jie is grateful for your trust and affirmation. But I have to say, with just a few of us, we won't be able to establish ourselves on the Divine Mountains. Furthermore, these resources are a sin in our hands, so I'd better return them to you. Wei Jie was about to send them back when Yi Zichen stopped him. I'll naturally provide you with experts. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 8-stage Sky Supreme Demon Race experts appeared in the room. Your Excellency, the 2 Yao bowed in greeting. From now on, you're no longer under the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's jurisdiction. Follow Wei Jie and work for him, said Yi Zichen. Yes, Your Excellency. That was one of the good things about the Yao of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. They obeyed him without question. No matter what you told them to do, even if you told them to die right now, they wouldn't hesitate. At the same time, Yi Zichen turned to Wei Jie. The premise of these 2 people is that they will follow you around. The gang doesn't need to be established in a day. In the early stages, you should first understand some of the complicated forces in the immortal realm. When the time comes, you can take your time to plan the establishment of the gang. 8th-stage Sky Supreme Yao had naturally come from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yi Zichen hadn't handed them all over to Wei Jie right away, because he was worried that they'd attract too much attention. The relationship between the Divine Mountains and the Yao realm hadn't been particularly harmonious lately. Wei Jie's previous worries were based on the fact that they didn't have any experts to back them up. Now that they had 2 8th-stage Sky Supreme demonic beasts, his previous worries could be dispelled. All right, leave everything to me. When Yi Zichen saw his solemn nod, he chuckled and nodded back. Don't suspect those you employ, and don't employ those you doubt. He had handed so many resources to Wei Jie, never suspecting that he would run away with them. In the lower lands, he'd always been the leader of upheaval. He'd also been in charge of the gang's operations, so he'd be more familiar with them. Oh, when did 2 more people appear? The great sage, who'd been playing with his phone all this time, put it down and arched his brows at the 2 Yao. Under his gaze, a trace of fear flashed through the eyes of the 2 divine beasts. Yao! After carefully examining them, the great sage craned his neck. They're my subordinates. Yi Zichen chuckled and explained their identities, then gestured at the great sage's phone. Why aren't you chatting with your old friends in the group anymore? How boring. The great sage smirked. How is it boring? Isn't the group still the same as before? Asked Yi Zichen. Yang Jian isn't here. As soon as the great sage said that, Yi Zichen's heart trembled. The great sage continued. Before, if he'd been in the group, we could have cursed at each other for a while. Although I don't like the look of him, he's definitely more interesting in the group than he is now. I wonder where he's gone now. Isn't that right? Yi Zichen nodded. An invasion of a demon race caused the world we live in to fall apart. My old friends, some are dead, some are injured, and some are scattered. The demon race is really a hateful race. That's right, how detestable. By the time Yi Zichen returned to Skyspan Academy, it was already late at night. Quite a few students were still walking around, sitting cross-legged and absorbing the essence of heaven and earth. Yi Zichen returned to his room, his mind still replaying the great sage's desolate expression. They'd all experienced the demon's devastation. They knew full well just how vile their behavior was. They'd mocked themselves for being weak and worked hard to become strong. But at the same time, the demons had left scars in their hearts that were difficult to erase. When Yi Zichen first arrived on the Divine Mountains, he'd looked down on the two races' harmonious coexistence with disdain. Was the demon race really worth living in harmony with? Perhaps some of them were, but most of them were just too ambitious. A great war was bound to break out between the gods and demons. The only thing he couldn't be sure of was when it would happen. But so long as that day came, Yi Zichen was determined to reclaim everything with interest. Yi Zichen set aside his scattered thoughts. Whenever he thought of the demons, his emotions stirred involuntarily. He took a deep breath, then sat cross-legged on his bed. All this time, Yi Zichen hadn't checked on his Dharma body's condition. Now that he did, he discovered a 12-winged youth sitting cross-legged on the ground. The youth's hair was snow-white, and his eyes were closed. It was almost complete. The Dharma body's basic structure was complete. All that was left were a few minor details. Based on Yi Zichen's conservative estimates, if he let it grow on its own, it'd be complete in about a week. However, Yi Zichen had waited so long that he couldn't wait any longer. Buzz! Yi Zichen summoned the Godhead in his sea of consciousness. He didn't even need to deliberately absorb it. As soon as it appeared, the surrounding divine power gathered around him. As he did so, a vortex appeared above Yi Zichen's head, absorbing divine power. It madly swallowed up all the surrounding divine power. As it swallowed up the surrounding divine power, the Dharma body inside him began its final stages at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the last strand of divine power was infused into it. Chapter 1274. A Dharma body technique. Once the Devil Dharma body technique took shape, Yi Zichen's strength skyrocketed. He just reached the 7th-stage Sky Supreme level, but he quickly reached the peak of the 7th stage. 8th stage, peak 8th stage, 9th stage, peak 9th stage. As he sat on his bed, he looked like he was leveling up in a game. His body radiated golden light, illuminating the entire room and the night sky. His cultivation continued climbing until he reached the diviner level barrier and didn't stop. The divine power in his body blew the horn at the wall 3 times, but none of the 3 attacks managed to pierce through the wall. The first spurt of energy was followed by the second and the third. His divine power seemed to be the same. After 3 fruitless attempts, he gave up on breaking through to the diviner level and settled down. Yi Zichen's tightly shut eyes snapped open. There was a hint of disappointment in them. He'd wanted to rely on his momentum to break through to the diviner level, but although he hadn't broken through, he'd at least reached the half-step diviner level. I wonder how strong this Devil Dharma body technique is. Yi Zichen licked his lips, then his eyes flashed. He pushed open the door and dashed out. Night fell. A lithe figure shuttled through Heaven Connect City. Not long after, the figure came to the outside of the city. He flew 100 miles out of the city and made sure that there were no tribes or villages in the surroundings before he stopped. He was Yi Zichen. There was no way he could figure out how strong the Devil Dharma body technique was just by sitting in his room. He might as well test it out and see for himself. Yi Zichen's Devil Dharma body technique was connected to him, so when he transmitted his consciousness to it, instantly, his body seemed to be enveloped by a ball of warm energy. A giant kneeling on one knee suddenly appeared with Yi Zichen at its center. In the blink of an eye, it was as if his soul had been stripped away and absorbed into the Devil Dharma body technique. Through his divine soul, he could control the Devil Dharma body technique's body. When it rose to its feet, he immediately felt as if the entire world had changed. It was as if he were a god in control of everything. His every word and action determined the life and death of all living things. He flapped the wings on his back, and the strong wind created by the wings blew the surrounding rocks into pieces. When he truly soared into the sky and looked down at the world below, the world in front of him was so small. Those mountains that he had to raise his head to see, those towering ancient trees that he couldn't see the end of, were all under his feet at this moment. Under my feet, Yi Zichen, who was controlling his Devil Dharma body, froze, then took a few steps forward. With every step he took, the surrounding earth trembled. When he arrived before the ancient tree, what's happening? This towering ancient tree didn't even reach his waist. This ancient tree was thousands of zhang tall. How tall would this Devil Dharma body be? Wasn't an ordinary sovereign celestial body only 100 feet tall? Jiang Yang's martial sovereign and Murong Xue's fire lady both had Dharma bodies that were 300 meters tall. But in his Dharma body, the ancient tree that was thousands of feet tall only reached his waist. He controlled the Devil Dharma body and waved it forward, uprooting the ancient tree. His palms slammed toward the mountain in the distance, and the entire mountain collapsed, leaving behind a huge palm print. This power, Yi Zichen couldn't help but be shocked. Although his strength was explosive, Yi Zichen was a bit embarrassed by his height. If he used his Dharma body, he'd definitely stand out like a crane in a flock of chickens. Can it be a little smaller? As soon as he thought this, the Devil Dharma body really did shrink in a human-like fashion. A little smaller, a little smaller. Just like the Rui Jingu Bang, Yi Zichen controlled the Devil Dharma body to shrink to about 100 feet tall. Yi Zichen controlled the Dharma body to attack his surroundings. His strength was still incomparably vast, but it was much smaller than before. In the future, I'll just keep it at this size. Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. He'd weakened quite a bit, but at least he wouldn't stand out so much. Although he hadn't seen many Devil Dharma bodies, he was confident that his Devil Dharma body wouldn't lose to any other Dharma body. Furthermore, his Devil Dharma body could return to its original size. This could be considered one of his trump cards. As he fought, he suddenly grew 10,000 feet tall. Wouldn't his opponent be stunned? However, he had to admit that maintaining the Dharma body was a huge drain on his divine power. Even though Yi Zichen had a godhead to support him, after an hour, he felt his divine power draining away. He was exhausted. He dispersed his Devil Dharma body, then stood on the ground and muttered to himself. His current realm should be a half-step celestial being or above that. Given his current strength, he was definitely at the peak of Skyspan Academy. Perhaps only the Grizzly Bear Society's platoon leader and that mysterious, top-ranked expert on the combat strength leaderboards could stand up to him. Even if Jiang Yong and Murong Xue came, they might not necessarily be able to defeat him. This wasn't Yi Zichen being arrogant. Jiang Yong was a 9th stage Sky Supreme, infinitely close to the half-step diviner level. Although Murong Xue was the strongest female student in the academy, she couldn't even compare to Jiang Yong in terms of cultivation. In terms of pure cultivation, the two of them had already lost. If you factored in the others, not even the Grizzly Bear Society's platoon leader or the top-ranked expert on the combat strength leaderboards would be enough. This Devil Dharma body was something he'd expended countless resources and divine power to nurture. Even if he shrunk it down to 100 feet, he had absolute confidence in it. Even if he faced off against those two, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Besides, his true strength lay in his divine artifacts. The Xianyuan sword and the Yao Sealing Pagoda. Any one of them was enough to make the upper 3 realms go crazy. Of course, Yi Zichen couldn't deny that those two had their own fortuitous encounters. But could their fortuitous encounter surpass the number 1 divine artifact of the primordial era, the Xianyuan sword? Then there was the Yao Sealing Pagoda. He had countless loyal Yao at his disposal. Even if the Grizzly Bear Society's paying, Juan had a faction backing him. Would his subordinates die for him without the slightest hesitation? These were all Yi Zichen's hidden advantages. However, it wasn't yet time for him to reveal them to the world. If he fought them, he could only use ordinary divine artifacts. In any case, the completion of the Devil Dharma body had helped Yi Zichen's cultivation advance by leaps and bounds. Although it was a pity he hadn't directly become a diviner, being a half-step diviner was enough for him to show off in the student society ranking competition. He could not wait to participate in the competition and compete with the elusive Jiang Wei, who was ranked number 1 on the combat power ranking. There was also Pang Wan. Chapter 1275. He's in trouble. By the time Yi Zichen returned to Anti-Upheaval's residence, it was already close to dawn. Shui Mo had told him that the student society ranking competition would be held in the afternoon. Once the groups were confirmed, they'd proceed to the ranking competition. It was fair to say that the ranking competition was imminent. The ranking competition wasn't just a matter of ranking. It was also a matter of face. Although Anti-Upheaval was in dire straits, it was still the leader of the 5 great student societies. If they could get into the top 5, that would be fine. If they dropped out of the top 5, things would look bad for them. As a result, Yi Zichen's Devil Dharma body took shape. Compared to the other student societies, his sudden increase in cultivation was like giving coal to Anti-Upheaval in a snowstorm. It wasn't just for the sake of the student society's face. It was also for his own. Yi Zichen sat in his room for the entire night, condensing his divine power so that he could be in peak condition, ready to face the upcoming fierce competition. Yi Zichen exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, then opened his eyes. He stretched, then headed to Shui Mo's residence. The ranking competition would be held in the afternoon. Yi Zichen still didn't know who was participating, so he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to get to know them. However, when he went to Shui Mo's residence, he didn't see her anywhere. He looked around the club, but didn't see anyone. Instead, he saw the members of the club huddled together not far away. They were all talking at once, and he didn't know what they were talking about. "What are you all doing here?" Yi Zichen walked up to them and asked. They hurriedly smiled and greeted him. "Platoon Leader Yi, you're all pretty free today, aren't you? Why are you huddled together and arguing? You're all red in the face." Yi Zichen looked them up and down, then saw that some of their faces were red and their necks were bulging. He couldn't help but tease them. "Platoon Leader Yi, you don't know yet, do you?" As soon as he finished speaking, a few of the club members around him said mysteriously, "Something happened in Skyspan City." Something happened in Skyspan City? The safest city on the northern Divine Mountain was Skyspan City. The Skyspan Trading Company was stationed there, and they had a close relationship with the Sea of Innocence. Yi Zichen's brows instantly darkened. Skyspan City is backed by the Sea of Innocence. Who would dare provoke them? I know, right? The club member slapped his thigh and said, "But something did happen in our Skyspan City. It even alarmed the city lord's mansion's Qin Weebing." "What's going on?" Yi Zichen asked solemnly. According to reliable sources, 100 miles north of Heaven Connect City seems to have suffered a violent attack. Almost everything within a radius of 10 miles has been destroyed, and the entire mountain range has been cut in half. The City Lord's Mansion and our academy have already sent people to investigate. I'm in trouble. This was a little familiar. The place they were talking about was most likely the place Yi Zichen went to last night. However, it wasn't as crazy as the club member made it out to be. At that time, he had only done a simple test. Although he couldn't help but throw a few punches afterward when he thought about it carefully, well, maybe that kind of situation could really be counted as ruins. Yi Zichen felt rather helpless. He just wanted to test out his Devil Dharma body's might, but he'd alarmed the City Lord's Mansion. Just now, we were trying to figure out who the invaders were. Didn't you and Platoon Leader Shui run into demons recently? I told them it was probably the demons, but they refused to believe me. Platoon Leader Yi, who do you think caused the destruction? The club members looked over at him. Yi Zichen couldn't help but smile bitterly. How can I say for sure? I've never investigated the scene. All right, you guys, stop talking about this. Regardless of whether or not it was a demon invasion, raising your cultivation is the most important thing. Otherwise, if the demons really did invade, do you think you can fight them with just a few of you? Don't just stand there. Hurry up and cultivate. We're on our way. The club members chuckled, but before they left, they said worriedly, "Platoon leader Yi, do you think we'll be able to hold our own in the ranking competition?" "Of course we can. You have to have faith in us." Yi Zichen chuckled. It seems platoon leader Yi is confident. The club members' eyes lit up. What's with all the nonsense? Hurry up and cultivate. All right. The club members chuckled and ran off. Although they couldn't participate in the ranking competition these past few days, they'd been preoccupied with it. They were all members of anti-upheaval, and it could be said that they were bound together for good or ill. Now that Yi Zichen said that, they could finally put down their worries. Judging from the direction they ran off in, they were most likely going to tell the other club members about it. Yi Zichen didn't stop them. Over the past few days, quite a few of the club members had been worried about the ranking competition. Giving them some hope wasn't a bad idea. It was just that his demonic Dharma body experiment had alarmed the city Lord's manor. Yi Zichen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Should I tell the city lord that I did it? Yi Zichen stood in place, hesitating despite himself. After a moment's thought, he dismissed the idea. If he took the initiative to say it, the city lord's manor would inevitably question him. That would be even more troublesome. At that moment, he received a message from the transmission slip in his spatial ring. The only people who could contact him through a transmission slip naturally weren't the members of the group. He took out the slip, probed it with his divine sense, and heard Xuan Mo's transmission through divine sense. "Someone from a society said you were looking for me. I'm in the main hall. Come on over." When Yi Zichen arrived at the main hall, quite a few people were already standing there. Yi Zichen recognized all of them: Luo Zi, Li Hu, and Cheng Guangfa. All of Anti-Upheaval's administrators were present, but there seemed to be someone else standing in the middle of them. It couldn't be Xuan Mo. Although Xuan Mo was a woman, she wasn't short. She couldn't compare to Li Hu or Cheng Guangfa, but she was on par with Luo Zi. However, Luo Zi couldn't even see the person standing in the middle of them. Through the gaps between them, Yi Zichen could vaguely make out a pair of pink shoes. "What are you standing around for? Let's go in." Just as Yi Zichen was trying to figure out who that person was, Xuan Mo walked past him with a plate of freshly washed fruits. "Wait a moment." Yi Zichen pulled her back and asked, "Who's inside?" "They're helpers I invited for the ranking competition." Xuan Mo smiled mysteriously. "Come with me. I'll introduce you two to each other." Xuan Mo followed her into the main hall and set the plate of fruits on the table. Then, a doting look flashed through her eyes as she walked in between Li Hu and the others. "Society head." Xuan Mo nodded at them, then narrowed her eyes and smiled. "Bebe, I'll introduce you to a good friend of mine." As she spoke, Xuan Mo walked over, holding the hand of a young girl who looked to be in her teens. Yi Zichen's expression froze, but the girl merely smiled and cocked her head. Chapter 1276. They're all sisters-in-law. When Yi Zichen saw the mischievous little girl, his head buzzed. Wasn't this Xue Honghong's little sister, Xue Bebe? Xue Bebe giggled and waved, her eyes flashing with craftiness. She'd known about Yi Zichen long ago, so when she saw him, she wasn't surprised at all. "Yi Zichen, what are you doing? My little sister is greeting you." Xue Mo patted him on the shoulder. When he heard that, he didn't even raise his brows. "You're saying she's your little sister?" "That's right." "Why?" "Xue Bebe is my little sister. I'm the second oldest in my family, and I have an older sister." "Your real little sister?" "Of course. Do you think we don't look alike?" Xue Mo pulled Xue Bebe into her arms and blinked. Alike. Yi Zichen nodded absent-mindedly. He'd long since suspected that Xuan Mo's family was unusual on the northern Divine Mountain, and Great Emperor Shui Yang's appearance only confirmed his suspicions. However, he'd never considered that Xue Mo was from the Sea of Innocence, and that Great Emperor Shui Yang was the Sea of Innocence's leader. If that was the case, then Xue Honghong was Xue Mo's older sister. Only now did Yi Zichen realize that when Emperor Hades teased him about being Shui Yang's son-in-law, he hadn't been referring to him in Shui Mo. Did that mean Emperor Hades knew about his relationship with Shui Honghong? Emperor Hades was a little too terrifying. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you so distracted? We'll be deciding the groups for the ranking competition this afternoon, and tomorrow's the competition. You're our society's main force. This won't do. Now that he knew who she was, Yi Zichen didn't know what to do. She was his little sister-in-law. I'm absolutely fine with the ranking competition. I just wanted to ask, your real name is actually Shui Momo, right? You're pretty smart, aren't you? I'm Shui Momo. The three of us have double characters. However, I didn't want others to know I was the Sea of Innocence's second daughter, so I dropped the Mo. Shui Mo nodded. Yi Zichen really wanted to call her his little sister-in-law, but in the end, he resisted the urge. It was better not to expose their relationship. Otherwise, how could they still be brothers in the future? The second daughter of the Sea of Innocence. TSK. I never would have guessed that I'd end up clinging onto such a big thigh. Yi Zichen chuckled and teased. Shui Bei, on the other hand, was somewhat unwilling. I'm the third miss of the Sea of Innocence, aren't I? I'm talking to you, but you're ignoring me. You's just as rude. You're on. Did you see Yi Zichen at first? Shui Mo was stunned. Yi Zichen's expression froze. Shui Bei hurriedly corrected herself. Second sister, you've misheard. How I'm Chintan, a sister. Do you think I have freedom like you and big sister? I chun, ri, xt chun I tian I xt chun. I tian, don't mind me, my sister is young. It's fine. Yi Zichen waved his hand, then arched his brows. But you just said she's a helper you invited? Are you sure? What do you mean? Are you looking down on me? Let me tell you, I'm really strong. Even your academies, Ironback Black Bear, Pang Wan, and that mysterious Jiang Wei might not be able to beat me. You'd better be careful. If you keep being so rude to me, I'll teach you a lesson. Shui Mo raised her fists and snorted angrily. Shui Mo's expression remained apologetic as she gestured for Yi Zichen to bear with her. How could Yi Zichen possibly get angry with her? However, he did like one thing she'd said just now. Ironback Black Bear. That was a rather righteous title for Pang Wan. Later, Yi Zichen learned that the student societies needed 5 members and 1 substitute. Anti-upheaval's members were naturally Luo Zi, Li Hu, Chun Guangfa, Shui Mo, and Yi Zichen. They'd invited Shui Bei to help avoid any injuries. That way, they wouldn't have enough members. According to Shui Mo, Shui Bei was actually a student of Skyspan Academy, but she'd always been cultivating in the Sea of Innocence. That was the only reason she'd counted Shui Bei as a participant. Otherwise, if everyone went looking for reinforcements, how could the Academy's student society ranking battles even be considered? It was already noon. The Academy's arena was packed with people. The Academy's ranking battles were Skyspan Academy's grandest event. Every student society wanted to know who they'd drawn, so they could gauge how far they'd go. Hey, isn't that the former #1 student society, anti-upheaval? And here I thought you were too scared to participate. As Yi Zichen and the others prepared to enter the arena, they heard a long, irritating moan from the distance. Anti-upheaval looked to the side and saw Pang Wan and the Grizzly Bear Society walking towards them. The one who'd just let out a mocking moan was none other than Chun Yi, who'd gotten into an argument with them at the welcoming ceremony. The Grizzly Bear Society had 6 members as well, 5 starters and 1 substitute. They were the Grizzly Bear Society's branch leaders. After being mocked, Li Hu's lips twitched and he snorted. And here I was wondering why the place smelled so bad. I was wondering why there was such a strong smell around here. But it turns out it's you, old Huang. I told you to brush your teeth back in the Grizzly Bear Society, but you didn't listen. You traitorous dog, said Chun Yi disdainfully. Who are you talking about? Li Hu glared at him. Chun Yi grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. I'm talking about you. You? Li Hu shrugged and took a step forward. Yi Zichen grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him back, then walked alongside Shui Mo. Can't your dog just go home? Don't let him bite people. This was directed at Pang Wan. Pang Wan couldn't help but smile calmly. I didn't manage it well. Sorry, but I really do admire your courage. You really had the guts to come here. What's there to be afraid of? Do you think society head Pang Wan could eat us? Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes and laughed. Pang Zheng laughed as well. How can we do that? It's just a friendly match, a club ranking competition. If the Grizzly Bear Society really draws anti-upheaval, I'll have my subordinates be a bit more ruthless. Suddenly, Pang Zheng's expression darkened. Yi Zichen clenched his fists. Their eyes met. In truth, there wasn't really any deep-seated hatred between the two of them. Their conflict was most likely based on the fact that Yi Zichen had poached some of their members from the very beginning. Anti-upheaval's aggressive recruitment meant that the Grizzly Bear Society's profits weren't as great as they'd imagined. Furthermore, in order to help his cousin settle her bet, Pang Wan had paid quite a bit too. Apart from that, there shouldn't be anything else, Yi Zichen thought to himself. However, if Pang Wan found out that Yi Zichen was thinking of their conflict in such a nonchalant manner, Pang Wan would probably cough up blood. Poaching their members was one thing, but Yi Zichen's demands for compensation had hurt him greatly. In any case, Yi Zichen didn't care too much about minor details like this. However, he still wanted to teach Pang Wan a lesson, for no other reason than the fact that Pang Wan's arrogance at the welcoming ceremony and now pissed Yi Zichen off. Chapter 1277. Jiang Wei and the Navigator. Hurry up and withdraw from the competition. Pang Zheng smiled ambiguously and patted Yi Zichen on the shoulder, then straightened his neck and followed the Grizzly Bears into the arena. Before entering, the Grizzly Bears' platoon leaders, as well as the other spectators, stared intently at anti-upheaval. Hurry up and withdraw. The ordinary members of anti-upheaval were furious. Li Hu, the irascible, looked like he wanted to fight them to the death. Yi Zichen reached out and stopped Li Hu, then glanced at Pang Zheng and the others and smiled. I'll say the same to you. Pang Zheng didn't so much as look back. He simply led the Grizzly Bears deeper into the arena. Why are you stopping me? The Grizzly Bears are too good at putting on airs. After the Grizzly Bears left, Li Hu roared, his face flushed with fury. Especially Chan Yinian, who'd accused him of betraying his master for glory. Li Hu and Luo Zi had been members of the Grizzly Bears for nearly 100 years. Although they hadn't done much for the Grizzly Bears, they were absolutely conscientious and conscientious. But how had the Grizzly Bears treated them? Just because they'd politely declined the Pang family's offer of an olive branch, they were ostracized within the society. Although Pang Zheng didn't show it, Li Hu and the others weren't idiots. If not for Pang Zheng's orders, the Grizzly Bears wouldn't have dared treat them like that. Furthermore, Pang Zheng had pretended he didn't know. Li Hu wasn't rebellious, but he wasn't foolishly loyal either. As a platoon leader, he knew quite a few of the Grizzly Bears' shady dealings in the shadows. If he really wanted to destroy the Grizzly Bears, all he had to do was expose them to the world. He said he betrayed his master for glory. What a joke. If you fight them, you'll fall into their trap, said Yi Zichen, patting Li Hu on the shoulder. Patting Li Hu's shoulder lightly, he said, the society ranking tournament is an event organized by the Academy. If we were to have a private fight with them, the Academy will definitely disqualify us. It's all talk. It's no use. We'll know who's stronger and who's weaker once we fight. Li Hu's expression was unfriendly as he panted heavily. Shue Bebe clenched her fists and gnashed her teeth. Second sister, why are you stopping me? That guy is too arrogant. He's going to piss me off. He's from the Pang family, right? When I get home, I'll tell my father to suppress the Pang family's arrogance. Little sister, this is just a conflict between our two societies. Besides, the Pang family's influence is complicated. It's not as simple as you think. Shui Mo tried to calm Shue Bebe down. How could she not be angry? Of course she was angry. However, she was the leader of anti-upheaval. At a time like this, she had to keep everyone calm. Everything was just as Yi Zichen had said. There was no point in bragging before the match. They would know when they actually fought. All right, don't sulk over there. Save your strength. When our people go on stage, just shout it out properly. With that, Shuemo took Shue Bebe by the hand and walked to Yizichen's side. Let's go in too. In the arena, countless societies of all sizes had arrived. Although the academy didn't directly arrange the positions for the clubs, all the clubs present had a tacit understanding to stand in the corresponding positions according to the strength of their clubs. At the very front were naturally the top 5 student societies. When anti-upheaval arrived, quite a few of the student societies glared at them with unfriendly expressions. It was obvious that quite a few student societies were eyeing anti-upheaval's reputation as one of the top 5 student societies. Do you see that? They're all waiting to use us as a stepping stone. Luozi took in everyone's gazes and chuckled. When Li Hu heard that, he glared back at them. A few of the student societies restrained themselves, but most of them glared at them provocatively. Momo, over here. Fortunately, Murong Shue waved her hand. Yi Zichen and the others ignored the student society's provocations and walked between the Aspiration Society and the Appearance Association. Oh, Bebe, you're here too? Murong Shue chuckled. Big sister Murong. Shue Bebe smiled sweetly. You ran into the Grizzly Bear Society outside? Jiang Yong walked over and deliberately scanned the Grizzly Bear Society with his divine sense. When he saw someone turn his head, he immediately grinned and waved the axe in his hand. Society head, Jiang Yong and the others are together, said Chuninian. What's so strange about that? These 3 societies have been going out on missions together lately. Why bother with them? They're just a bunch of rabble, said Pang Zheng disdainfully. When he heard Jiang Yong's question, Yi Zichen nodded. Li Hu twisted his neck and cursed. I'm so King pissed off. It's one thing for those Grizzly Bear Society bastards to be so arrogant, but even those trashy student societies are King provoking us. Let go. Compared to the other 4 top student societies, our anti-upheaval really is a bit inferior, said Shuemo. Don't mind them too much. They're just a bunch of dreamers. Do they think they can casually encroach on the title of a top power? Never mind everything else. Just Brother Ye's presence is enough to keep anti-upheaval's title. Jiang Yong tried to comfort him, then chuckled. But Brother Ye's cultivation has risen really quickly. But Brother Ye's progress in cultivation is really fast. Brother Yi was only at the Earth Supreme level a while ago, but now you're even stronger than me. Now, even I can't quite see through your strength. I was just lucky, said Yi Zichen modestly. Anti-upheaval, the Aspiration Society, and the Appearance Association had joined forces. Quite a few student societies sank into contemplation. Let me tell you something. Jiang Wei is participating in the student society ranking battles too, said Jiang Yong solemnly. He's participating? Shui Mo was stunned. Sword Immortal Jiang Wei had always been elusive, and he'd never participated in any activities. Some people said he'd joined a student society, while others said he'd never joined a student society. In any case, he was a complete mystery at Skyspan Academy. Jiang Yong's solemn expression was due to his fear of Jiang Wei. In the entire academy, Jiang Wei was the only person he wasn't confident in beating. His sudden participation in the battle could very well affect the ranking of the top 5 societies. Which student society is he participating in? Asked Yi Zichen. The Flames of War. We should call them navigators now, said Murong Shue. Murong Shue spoke up. Just last night, the Flames of War submitted an application to the Academy to change its name to the Navigators. At the same time, they announced that Sword Immortal Jiang Wei will be participating in the Student Society ranking battles as the Navigators' leader. Are you serious? Jiang Wei joined the Flames of War? The Flames of War have Su Chao and Su Lei, and now there's this Jiang Wei. Luo Zi was utterly shocked, then shrugged. It seems the Flames of War will have to take the lead seat this time. We'll just have to fight our way into the top 5. Why would Jiang Wei participate in an event like this? Hasn't he never done so before? Chapter 1278. The rules changed. The Flames of War were ranked 6th. The Su brothers were twins, and they were both 8th-stage Sky Supremes. Because they were twins, they could read each other's minds. If they attacked together, even a 9th-stage Sky Supreme would have a headache. Jiang Wei's participation was an absolute threat to the top 5. It was fair to say that the new Flames of War, or rather, the Navigators, had already changed their name to the Navigators. If Anti-Upheaval wanted to maintain its position in the top 5, they'd have to contend with the 5th-ranked Proud Heaven Society. However, the Proud Heaven Society's D Long was no pushover. Everyone in Anti-Upheaval's expressions were grave. Yi Zichen was rather interested in Jiang Wei, the famous sword immortal. He should be here too, right? Which one is he? Can you point him out for me? That one over there, the one with the rusted sword. Jiang Yong gestured at him, and Yi Zichen easily found him. He was simply too eye-catching. Never mind his strange attire. Just his cold, arrogant aura made him stand out like a crane among chickens. He sat cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed. No one dared get within half a meter of him. Suddenly, Jiang Wei opened his eyes and met Yi Zichen's gaze. When he sensed his opponent's gaze, Yi Zichen clearly sensed sharp sword intent attack him. As a fellow sword cultivator, Yi Zichen naturally knew how to condense his will into form. Their gazes met, and before long, Jiang Wei nodded and smiled at Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen did the same, then looked away. Brother Yi, you fought Jiang Wei? Jiang Yong arched his brows. This Jiang Wei really is extraordinary. Yi Zichen nodded. This sword immortal Jiang Wei was no ordinary person. His comprehension of the sword had reached an extremely high level. It was fair to say that he was practically a sword maniac. His entire being was immersed in his sword intent. Just now, Yi Zichen had used the Xinyuan sword art, heaven plundering, to fight him to a standstill. It was easy to imagine just how deep Jiang Wei's comprehension of sword intent was. How annoying. Why would Jiang Wei participate in an event like this? Shui Mo was rather irritated. Everything else was fine. Even if the grizzly bears mocked her or the other student societies provoked her, she could take it all. Only the addition of Jiang Wei made her feel uncomfortable. Jiang Wei joined the Flames of War and changed his name to the Navigators. I heard it has something to do with this event, said Murong Shui. Change of plans. Shui Mo didn't understand. We're not too sure about that, but I heard that the event this time won't be the same as before. There's been a huge change in the middle. As for the specifics, we'll have to wait for the people from the academy to tell us. Shui Mo's heart sank further. This year's ranking competition was far too unfriendly to anti-upheaval. Jiang Wei's participation was like adding hail to snow for them. Now, even the format of the competition had to be changed. Second, sis, don't be afraid. It's just Jiang Wei. When the time comes, I'll just beat them all up, comforted Shui Bei when she saw Shui Mo's grim expression. That's right. With Bei around, there's nothing for you to worry about. Murong Shui chuckled as well. Shui Mo forced a smile and nodded, but her heart was heavy. In the blink of an eye, an hour quietly passed. A wisp of green smoke appeared in the center of the martial field. Not long after, an old man appeared in front of everyone. It's him. When he saw the old man, Yi Zichen couldn't help but arch his brows. Qiu Huai was Skyspan Academy's vice dean. He'd heard that he was a ruler-level expert. Dean, Luo Zi and the others were stunned. Although the ranking competition was a grand occasion for the academy, it wasn't enough to invite an expert of that level. It seemed that Murong Shui and the others were telling the truth. The rules of the ranking competition had to be changed. Otherwise, Qiu Huai wouldn't have needed to show up. Qiu Huai smiled calmly at the students. Are you all curious as to why I'm here? The students didn't say anything, but their meaning was clear. If I let the academy's teachers tell you, you might have a lot of questions, so I might as well tell you myself. It's like this. The ranking competition is canceled. Whoosh. The students were in an uproar. They'd waited far too long for the ranking competition. How could it be canceled just like that? Even though it was the vice dean, quite a few student society heads started asking questions. All of you, stop for a moment. I can understand how you're feeling, but our ranking competition is canceled. In other words, it's not canceled. It's just being carried out in a different way. The students didn't quite understand what Qiu Huai was getting at. Then they heard him continue. The Yao and Demon realms have submitted an application to the God realm in preparation for a competition between geniuses. His Excellency, the God Emperor, has given his approval, and the academies of the 9 Divine Mountains are sending out students. The competition will take place at the Divine Martial Academy on the Central Divine Mountain. Every academy can send out 5 student societies. The number of student societies will be the same as the ranking competition, 6. Before coming here, I've already decided to send out the top 5 student societies of our academy: Anti-Upheaval, Grizzly Bear Society, Aspiration Society, Appearance Association, and Proud Heaven Society. Of course, the performance of the student societies we send out will have a huge impact on Skyspan Academy and the Northern Divine Mountain. The academy will select the best, and the 5 great student societies won't make the final decision. Any student society present who is stronger than them can issue a challenge. The winner will be able to expel the student society and head to the Central Divine Mountain. The representatives of the 5 great student societies glanced coolly at the other student societies around them. Right now, they were the enemies of every other student society present. However, this was understandable. The Academy's actions weren't wrong. The strong rose, while the weak fell. This was an eternal truth. The most dangerous of the 5 was Anti-Upheaval. Everyone present knew that although Anti-Upheaval ranked first, they were the weakest. However, no one wanted to be the first to eat crabs. The others were itching to try, but no one actually challenged them. Furthermore, the Navigators hadn't even made an appearance yet. Navigators. At that moment, Su Chao, one of the Su brothers of the Navigators, raised his fists and walked out. His appearance caused the representatives of the 5 great student societies to reveal grave expressions. Jiang Wei was someone they couldn't afford to underestimate. Even the arrogant Pang, Zheng, subconsciously narrowed his eyes when he saw Su Chao step out. However, most people turned to look at Anti-Upheaval. Of the 5 great student societies, Anti-Upheaval was the weakest. Furthermore, they weren't even in the top 20 of the student society's combat strength leaderboards. The way they saw it, the Navigators would most likely challenge Anti-Upheaval. With Jiang Wei around, the Navigators had the right to challenge any student society. Anti-Upheaval broke out in a cold sweat, but who would have thought? Chapter 1279. Earth Dragon Beast, Soul the Proud Heaven Society was ranked 5th overall, while the Flames of War were ranked 6th. Although they were ranked 5th and 6th respectively, the difference between a powerhouse and an ordinary society was like the difference between heaven and earth. In the past, Su Chao wouldn't have been so nonchalant when he mentioned the Proud Heaven Society. But things were different now. With Jiang Wei's addition, the newly renamed Navigators had more than enough confidence to challenge any society. Although Su Chao didn't understand why Jiang Wei had chosen to challenge the Proud Heaven Society, he wasn't worried at all that anything would go wrong. The Proud Heavens Society. When Su Chao mentioned the Proud Heavens Society, practically everyone present froze. They'd all assumed that the Navigators would challenge Anti-Upheaval. After all, the Anti-Upheaval Society was the easiest to bully. Instead, he'd chosen a society that wasn't so easy to bully. Needless to say, Jiang Wei was the one who'd made the decision. Was this the confidence of someone ranked first on the leaderboards? He didn't want to bully the weak, but the strong? Or did Jiang Wei have a grudge against the Proud Heaven Society? That was the only thing the audience could think of. It wasn't just the onlookers who didn't know what was going on. Even the top 5 societies thought the same. So he's not challenging our society? Chen Guangfang's eyes widened in shock. When Su Chao walked out, his heart was in his throat. Does Jiang Wei have a grudge against the Proud Heaven Society? Luo Zi couldn't help but ask. Su Chao stood in the challenger's seat, taking in everyone's gazes. He couldn't help but smile bitterly to himself. You think you're the only ones confused? I'm the same. When Jiang Wei said he wanted to challenge the Proud Heaven Society, Su Chao was dumbfounded as well. He'd thought Anti-Upheaval would be the easiest. When the time came, the Navigators would replace Anti-Upheaval and go to the Central Divine Mountain. That would be the best combination for Skyspan Academy. But he never would have guessed that Jiang Wei would make such a decision. Although he didn't understand, he didn't show any signs of resistance. He walked out and announced the proud Heaven Society. Have any of you provoked Jiang Wei in private? De Long, the leader of the proud Heaven Society, paused for a moment, then turned to the team leaders beside him. His thoughts were the same as everyone else's. The current situation was clear. The navigators would definitely get a seat, so suppressing anti-upheaval was their best option. However, Jiang Wei had purposely set his sights on their club. This was an action that wanted to step on his club to rise. He could only assume that someone in their club had offended Jiang Wei. Guild leader, you really think highly of us. Jiang Wei, do we really dare to provoke him? The guild leader couldn't help but bitterly smile. Jiang Wei had entered Skyspan Academy in less than half a year. 10 years ago. First in 3 years. Since then, he had dominated the first place for a long time, and no one could shake him off. His innate talent was peerless. This kind of existence could scare off a large number of people just by mentioning his name. His stunning resume was even more daunting. Provoke him? Who would have that kind of courage? De Long's gaze darkened as he looked at the bitter smiles on the team leaders' faces. In his opinion, none of his team leaders would dare to provoke Jiang Wei. Since that was the case, Jiang Wei was purposely trying to slap him in the face on this occasion. Could it be that he had angered him somehow? Proud Heaven Society, what are you doing over there? If you're afraid, just give up your spot. We, the navigators, will go to the central divine mountain in your stead. That way, you won't have to embarrass yourselves outside. Su Chao narrowed his eyes and called out impatiently. De Long calmed himself down, no longer thinking about these trivial matters. He was fourth on the leaderboards, after all. He was on the same level as Murong Shui. Jiang Wei's name was indeed resounding, but De Long was also a proud son of heaven. What are you shouting for? De Long snorted coolly, then waved his sleeves and stepped forward. What are the rules? 1-on-1. The winner gets 1 point, and the winner gets 3 points, said Xiao and Huai. Can the winner stay on for the next round? Yes. De Long's heart instantly sank. He couldn't help but look at the distant, grim youth holding a rusted sword. All right. After a brief moment of hesitation, De Long agreed. Although Jiang Wei was giving him a lot of pressure, if he backed down now, where would his face go? Besides, he wanted to see for himself just how strong this first-ranked Jiang Wei was. I'll be the first to fight. Who will you send? De Long narrowed his eyes at Su Chao. Of course. Su Chao swung his arms and took a step forward. However, at that moment, a figure in blue landed in front of him. I'll fight the navigators. The newcomer carried a rusted sword, a lock of white hair between his eyebrows. His sleeves fluttered despite the lack of wind. His entire body exuded a cold, arrogant, and indifferent aura. His entrance caused everyone to gulp. Su Chao shouted from behind, "President, you don't need to personally deal with these small fries. You don't need to personally deal with these small fries. I don't like trouble, and time is limited. It's best if I deal with them as quickly as possible." It was hard to say whether Jiang Wei's EQ was low or whether he was doing this on purpose. In any case, his words and actions didn't take De Long or the proud Heaven Society seriously at all. "Heh, I like that," laughed Jiang Yong. "You're arrogant enough." Li Hu nodded. Everyone could hear the disdain in his voice, but no one thought he was being foolish or arrogant. It was all because he was Jiang Wei. These words instantly infuriated De Long. He grinned, his eyes blazing with viciousness. "All right, then let me have a taste of a Sword of Mortal's techniques. Make your move." Jiang Wei smiled, still holding the rusted sword, and looked indifferently at De Long in front of him. He didn't even try to defend. His entire body was full of openings. Arrogant. With a furious roar, a layer of dragon scales appeared on De Long's arm. The D family really went all out. I can't believe they found an earth dragon beast soul for De Long. Jiang Yong crossed his arms and smiled calmly. Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. What do you mean? Brother Yi, you don't know this, do you? De Long's family is human, but half Yao runs through their veins. Their clansmen can use a secret art to absorb beast souls and obtain their former strength. The scales on De Long's arm belong to a high-grade divine beast, the armored earth dragon. Whether in terms of strength or defense, they're both terrifying. Then how terrifying is it? Jiang Yong clearly hadn't expected Yi Zichen to ask such a question. He froze for a moment, then hesitated. If I don't use my Dharma body, I won't be a match for him at all. That's strong. Li Hu sighed in amazement. Yi Zichen had a rough idea of what this beast soul was, but right now, Di Long was facing Jiang Wei. Chapter 1280. The terrifying Jiang Wei. After merging with the Earth Dragon beast soul, Di Long's arms and face were covered in ferocious ironback Earth Dragon scales. The aura of a ferocious beast was released from his body. Many people who were shrouded by this aura revealed a look of fear. Di Long's eyes were bloodshot as he roared and charged towards Jiang Wei. Every step he took left deep footprints on the ground. He punched. The wind from his fist whistled. One could vaguely see the trajectory of his punch. The surrounding space was distorted and torn. It's an Earth Dragon beast soul. How did the Di family get a beast soul of this level? Su Chao frowned. Even though it was Jiang Wei standing there, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Jiang Wei was still standing there, watching Di Long's fist approach and the power of this fist. Could it be that Jiang Wei's invincible golden body will fade here? Although the possibility of this was low, many students had this thought. To them, Di Long was also in the top 5 of the combat power rankings. For him to be in the top 5, the gap between them shouldn't be too big. Moreover, the top 5 had never fought directly. Their rankings were just based on the school's statistics. Now, Jiang Wei and Di Long were fighting. Di Long's fist was full of power, but Jiang Wei still didn't do anything. Maybe Di Long could win. They were right. Those who could enter the top 5 of the combat power rankings were all geniuses. In other words, the top 10 of the combat power rankings were all about the same. But that was only for those ranked 2nd to 10th. You've lost. At this moment, Jiang Wei, who hadn't done anything, sighed. He ignored Di Long's fist and turned around. Under his cold and arrogant voice, everyone could see a trace of pity in his eyes. What was he feeling pity for? That Di Long was too weak. That he couldn't summon the desire to fight? But Jiang Wei hadn't moved at all. He hadn't even unsheathed his sword. Why did he say that Di Long had lost for no reason? Those who weren't from the top 5 guilds frowned. They didn't understand. Even the leaders of the top 5 guilds narrowed their eyes and pondered Jiang Wei's words. At the same time, their gazes fell on Di Long, trying to find any clues. What kind of joke is that? Die. Di Long's actions were somewhat restrained by Jiang Wei's words, but he didn't feel any discomfort. Seeing that the other party had completely turned his back on him, a ruthless glint flashed across his eyes, and he swung his sword at the other party's head. Swoosh. Suddenly, a bloody gash appeared on his face. In the blink of an eye, countless strands of sword chi landed on his body, causing his dragon scales to fall to the ground. Dark red blood flowed down his broken scales, and his entire body fell several meters back. Before he fell to the ground, a faint bloodstain appeared on his throat. The bloodstain was very light, only slightly cutting the skin around his throat. However, everyone knew that it was fortunate that this was only a competition within the academy. If the two of them were to truly fight to the death, the wound would have been slightly heavier. Dylan died. What on earth happened? The students' eyes were filled with astonishment. The presidents of the powerful societies also narrowed their eyes, their gazes very solemn. What's going on? Did any of you see Jiang Wei attack? Li Hu glared at the crowd and shouted. Luo Zi and the others shook their heads. They'd been staring at Jiang Wei and Di Long this entire time, worried that they wouldn't be able to see their movements with their naked eyes. They'd even used their divine senses to lock onto their movements. However, they still hadn't seen any signs of Jiang Wei attacking. Although I'm in the top 5 of the student rankings, and although it's hard to accept, I have to say that we're far inferior to Jiang Wei. The Aspiration Society's Jiang Yong sighed gravely. Murong Shui couldn't help but nod. This Jiang Wei. Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. His mind was filled with images of Jiang Wei's attacks. He hadn't even seen Jiang Wei attack, but in reality, Jiang Wei had. However, he'd used his will to draw his sword. His movements were so fast that even divine senses couldn't keep track of them. He slashed 394 times in half a breath. Jiang Wei really is terrifying, muttered Shui Mo Yizichin was astonished that Shui Mo could tell. After all, he was a peak 9th stage Sky Supreme, half a step into the diviner realm. Add to that his comprehension of sword intent, and that was why he'd noticed Jiang Wei's attack. Shui Mo was just a 3rd stage Sky Supreme. The next moment, he saw a brand appear between Shui Mo's brows. By her side, Shui Bei's glowed with a similar brand. The power of bloodlines really makes people jealous, he muttered to himself. In any case, the experts naturally understood Jiang Wei's methods. The onlookers, who didn't know what was going on, were confused, but at the same time, they marveled at Jiang Wei's strength. They didn't know what Jiang Wei had done, but they knew. Jiang Wei was strong. I said you lost, so you lost. Next, Jiang Wei stood with his back to Di Long, his hands clasped behind his back. The proud Heaven Society hurriedly rushed forward and shoved a healing pill into Di Long's mouth. Their gazes were filled with terror. We admit defeat, shouted the proud Heavens Society's leader. They had no choice but to admit defeat. Jiang Wei could stay and fight, but Di Long was the proud Heaven Society's strongest expert. If even Di Long wasn't Jiang Wei's match, then there was no one in their society who could. When he heard the proud Heaven Society admit defeat, Jiang Wei didn't even turn around. He simply hugged his rusted sword and walked back to the Navigator Society. However, as he walked back, he glanced at Yi Zichen and nodded. Yi Zichen froze for a moment, then nodded back at him. The proud Heaven Society has admitted defeat, so the Navigator Society will replace them and head to the Central Divine Mountain. Are there any other student societies that wish to challenge them? If not, they'll go to the Central Divine Mountain in Skyspan Academy's place. Xiao and Huai stood in the center of the arena and spoke calmly. He was a ruler-level expert. Jiang Wei's little tricks were nothing to him. However, he was still quite satisfied with Jiang Wei. It wasn't easy for someone at his level to achieve such feats. Wait a moment. A soft cry sounded out from the proud Heaven Society. Everyone looked over and saw Di Long being supported by his society's members. Even though he'd taken a healing pill, his body was still riddled with frightening wounds. There were even some that hadn't fully healed and were bleeding profusely. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper, but his proud eyes were filled with an unyielding determination. He glanced at Jiang Wei, his gaze blazing. This time he'd lost. He'd lost thoroughly, but he refused to accept it. However, he also knew that it would be difficult for him to challenge Jiang Wei in his current state. Even so, he still had to go to the Central Divine Mountain. Right now, we can also challenge them, right? Sure, but you can't challenge the Navigators. Chapter 1281. Shall we quit? Will come. From the start of the ranking competition to the changes in the rules and the competition on the Central Divine Mountain, anti-upheaval had always been at the heart of the struggle. Those who were ranked in the top 10 might have a chance to enter the top 5, including the lower-ranked societies. They all believed that anti-upheaval didn't deserve to be one of the 5 great powers, and that they were the easiest to take down. The Navigators' challenge to Proud Heaven confused the other guilds. However, from this challenge, they had witnessed the strength of Jiang Wei, who was ranked first on the combat power ranking. It was not a baseless rumor. It wasn't until the Proud Heaven Society challenged anti-upheaval that the surrounding student societies felt like everything was back on track. Even if the Proud Heaven Society didn't exist, the top 10 student societies would probably challenge anti-upheaval. That's more like it. We should let anti-upheaval come down. Isn't that right? The Navigators should just shut down anti-upheaval. That's the best option. I really don't know what Jiang Wei is thinking. Could it be that he simply wants everyone to know how strong he is, and is willing to use Aotion as a stepping stone? Shoo, lower your voice. If Jiang Wei hears you, you'll be in for it. The ordinary members of the various societies were already whispering to each other, while anti-upheaval's members looked at each other. The Proud Heaven Society is challenging us. Who should we send out? The first victory affects morale the most. The Proud Heavens team's Di Long is heavily injured, so he probably won't be able to fight for a while. The other team leaders are about as strong, as Tiger Li and the others, I'll go for the first battle. Li, whose battle axe had already appeared in his hand. He glared angrily at the proud Heaven Society. I don't think that's appropriate. Shui Mo shook her head. I suggest that we send out the stronger members. It'd be best if they can win easily. That way, we'll be able to curb the other society's greed for our title. I'll go. As anti-upheaval continued to argue, Shui Bei tilted her head up and walked out, ignoring everyone's reactions. When did this grand aunt come? Chiao and Huai couldn't help but facepalm. Challenging anti-upheaval? You really have guts. Today, Big Sister Bei will teach you a good lesson. Come on, who's next? Shui Bei was young to begin with and looked like a little girl. To others, the way she stood in the arena with a fuming look was almost non-existent. She was, however, a little cute. The captain sent by the proud Heaven Society stared blankly for a moment. Little girl, what are you doing here? Can't you tell? I'm here to fight. Shui Bei puffed out her chest and put her hands on her hips. Your proud Heaven Society sent you out? All right, then prepare your last words. Pooh. Across from Shui Bei, the captain laughed. Then he looked playfully at Anti-Upheaval's position. No way. Anti-Upheaval has so many big shots here, but you sent a little lowly? Isn't that embarrassing? The onlookers below also laughed and shouted, Little girl, go back quickly and ask your adults to come out. Shui Bei's face turned red in the face of everyone's ridicule. She glared at the crowd, biting her lips and clenching her fists tightly. You guys, all right, if any of you can't accept it, then come up and see if Big Sister Bei won't blow your head off. But it was this angry look that made the people below laugh even more happily. All right, I'll handle anti-upheaval. At that moment, Yi Zichen landed in front of Shui Bei, reached out and tousled her hair. Bei, go back. What are you doing? Shui Bei glared at him. I said I'll handle this. Be good, I'll deal with these small fries. You're our secret weapon. Now's not the time to expose yourself. Leave this to me. Secret weapon. When she heard this, Shui Bei's eyes lit up and she felt a little smug. Then I'll leave this to you. Don't disappoint me. She swayed her head back to anti-upheaval. Shui Mo pulled her into her arms. Can Yi Zichen do it? Shui Bei muttered. If he loses, how embarrassing would that be? I might as well just beat them up. But he said I'm their secret weapon. He, secret weapon. Bei giggled like an idiot. Luo Zi frowned. Platoon leader Yi, is it really all right for you to go? The proud Heaven Society sent their first captain, a peak 8th stage Sky Supreme. Trust him. Shui Mo's gaze brimmed with trust. If he's volunteering, he's definitely confident. I trust him. I trust Brother Yi too, said Jiang Yong. On the arena, Yi Zichen's appearance eased Xiao and Huai's breath. Just now, when Shui Bei was on stage, he'd been worried that something might happen to her. Great Emperor Shui Yang was fine, but he was worried about Zhao Qianhe. This big sister doted on Shui Bei to the heavens. If anything happened to her, she'd flip Skyspan Academy upside down. He was a ruler, but his life was so stifling. Yi Zichen's appearance didn't just relieve Qiao and Huai. Quite a few student societies' gazes narrowed. The most obvious was the Grizzly Bear Society's Pang Zheng. When he saw Yi Zichen, his gaze turned incomparably sinister. It wasn't just him. Even Jiang Wei, who'd been closing his eyes and hugging his rusted sword, opened his eyes. A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. You're that Yi Zichen, the excavator who rose to fame as soon as he entered the academy, right? Snorted the proud Heaven Society's platoon leader. Although you didn't directly poach our members, your appearance caused quite a few of us to withdraw. Is that so? Since you're a new student, you should know that you shouldn't be here. Your society is sending you to your death. Do you know that? Although this was a competition, I didn't go easy on you. I'd advise you to let the others come. However, the others in your society are just SOSO. Only Luo Zi and Li who are capable of standing on the stage, but they're still a ways off from our platoon leaders. Is that so? You're doing this on purpose, kid? That's right. Yi Zichen nodded non-committally, then looked at the platoon leader. A competition is a competition. What's the point of saying so much? You challenged us first, and now you're telling me to withdraw. How about we just call it quits? How about we withdraw and give our place to your proud heaven society? Of course. The platoon leader laughed. That really isn't a bad choice. Do you really think your society has the strength to fight us? You've really gone crazy. When Yi Zichen saw the platoon leader's arrogance, he couldn't help but feel speechless. Chapter 1282. A scene of déjà vu. Just as the rumors say, you are quite arrogant. The proud Heaven Society's leader's expression was unsightly. He looked at Yi Zichen threateningly. Who does he think he is? Jiang Wei, daring to challenge all of them? Even if their leader, Di Long, was injured and unable to participate, the other captains who had come to participate were all 7th or 8th stage Sky Supremes. 1 year. Go look for Di Long and tell him. Pang Zheng of the Grizzly Bears called Chen Yinian over and whispered a few words in his ear. After hearing this, Chen Yinian was stunned for a moment and said, "That's not very good. There's nothing bad about it. This is his own request. We're just adding fuel to the fire." Seeing Pang Zheng's calm smile, Chen Yinian hesitated for a moment before walking over to the proud Heaven Society. Look, Chen Yinian is going over to Di Long of the proud Heaven Society. Luo Zi pointed at Chen Yinian off in the distance. The proud Heaven Society has always been on good terms with the Grizzly Bear Society. There's nothing strange about the two societies working together, said Jiang Yong. No, just now, I noticed that Pang Zheng seemed to have said something to Chen Yinian. That's why he went over to the proud Heaven Society. Luo Zi frowned. I think there's something fishy going on here. At the same time, Chen Yinian told Di Long what Pang Zheng had told him. Dylan frowned and looked at Chen Yin. Old Pang really said that. That's what our guild leader said. Chen Yinian nodded. I understand. As Chen Yinian left, the captain of the proud Heaven Society snorted angrily. We don't need to deal with you. Wait. Just as the proud Heaven's platoon leader was about to speak, Di Long raised his hand. Since platoon leader Yi of anti-upheaval has said so, we'll naturally fulfill his wish. As they spoke, the other commanders of the proud Heaven Society walked into the arena with strange expressions on their faces. Everyone could tell what the proud Heaven Society wanted to do with their actions. They're really going up together. After all, they're a powerful guild. If they do this, they won't have any face. What are you talking about? Isn't that what that kid from Anti-Upheaval said? He was the one who boasted. So how could he blame the proud Heaven Society? I'm just a passerby. I don't belong to these two societies. Logically speaking, the proud Heaven Society is going a bit too far. The students all had different opinions. On Anti-Upheaval's side, the hot-tempered Li who exploded. Motherfucker, does the proud Heaven Society even have any face left? They even had the nerve to ask their team leader to come up. Since that's the case, let's go up as well. We might as well have a group battle with them. The steady Luo Zi narrowed his eyes and nodded. It looks like Chen Yinian went to Di Long to talk about this matter. I think it's a good idea. Pang Zheng. Shui Mo narrowed her eyes at the Grizzly Bear Society's Pang Zheng. Coincidentally, he was also looking at Anti-Upheaval. Pang Shuang chuckled. Anti-Upheaval's platoon leader, Yi, was the one who suggested it. I don't think there's anything wrong with the proud Heaven Society doing this. Brother Yi, why aren't you saying anything? Don't tell me you want your group to attack as well. Isn't this too embarrassing? You're the one who boasted. However, I believe that guild leader Di Long is very magnanimous. If you really wish to join them, they shouldn't refuse. Of course. Di Long chuckled. If our brothers and sisters in Anti-Upheaval want a group battle, I'll agree. Di Long and Pang Zheng were playing along. Naturally, the proud Heaven Society wasn't afraid of a group battle. Their overall strength was far superior to Anti-Upheaval's, so their chances of winning were much higher. Motherfucker, a group battle is a group battle. Liu grabbed his axe and leapt forward. He ran to Yi Zichen's side, his entire body radiating a murderous aura as he glared at the proud Heaven Society. Why are you here? Hurry up and go back. Do we really need so many people to deal with these weaklings? When Yi Zichen saw that Anti-Upheaval had appeared, he hurriedly tried to stop them. At the same time, he looked at the proud Heaven Society and clicked his tongue. I never would have guessed you'd really come at us together. But that's fine too. If we get rid of you together, won't everyone else who has designs on anti-upheaval give up as well? He smiled calmly at the surrounding student societies, then sent Li Hu and the others back to the spectator stands. You can all go back. Just leave me here. Platoon Leader Yi, go back. At Yi Zichen's unquestionable command, Li Hu and the others reluctantly returned to the spectator stands. Dean, didn't you say it would be one-on-one? Is this really appropriate? Although they'd returned to the spectator stands, Shui Mo was still worried about Xiao and Huai's safety. Xiao and Huai was certain that he was the most frustrated ruler he'd ever met. Shui Mo, you don't trust me? Shui Mo's lips quivered, unsure of what to say. Then she heard Yi Zichen say, if you trust me, then that's good. Do you trust me? All right. Under Yi Zichen's gaze, Shui Mo bit her lip and gave up on pressuring Xiao and Huai. However, they still gripped their weapons tightly. If Yi Zichen couldn't handle him, they'd charge in at the first sign of trouble. Only then did Xiao and Huai relax slightly. When he looked at Yi Zichen, he was even more satisfied. This kid wasn't bad. He'd already saved him twice. Who cared if it was a one-on-one battle? After sending Li Hu and the others back to the spectator stands, Yi Zichen assumed his most relaxed posture, then beckoned at the Proud Heaven Society. Come on. The Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders were still somewhat hesitant. Ganging up on one person was outrageous. However, they were still part of the Proud Heaven Society, and they obeyed De Long's orders. Even if they won, it wouldn't be an honorable victory, but they still had to fight. I'm sorry. One of the Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders apologized in advance, but he didn't hold back in the slightest. Yi Zichen didn't move in the slightest. He simply watched the Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders attack him. The spectating members of Anti-Upheaval broke out in a cold sweat, while the other students watched in bewilderment. Deja vu. Jiang Wei had faced De Long like this. Now, Yi Zichen faced the Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders in the same manner. Could it be? Just as the thought flashed through the spectators' minds, Yi Zichen's lips curved into a smile. You've lost. His familiar words caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Then they saw Yi Zichen ignore the Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders. Instead, he calmly clasped his hand behind his back and looked away. He glanced at Jiang Wei, then nodded and smiled. Boom! Instantly, countless beams of sword energy engulfed the Proud Heaven Society platoon leaders, just like when Jiang Wei faced De Long. Chapter 1283. The 5 great societies confirmed sword chi swept out. The sword energy Yi Zichen released seemed to be even stronger than Jiang Wei's. The sword energy mixed with the wind instantly created a tempest. What the hell is going on? The spectating students shielded their eyes with their hands, trying their best to resist the airflow created by the sword chi. However, the Heavenly Supremes were unable to face this current head-on. They felt as if they were about to be blown away by it. Those with slightly higher realms also found it extremely difficult to resist. The Aspiration Society, Anti-Upheaval, and the Appearance Association stand behind me and Murong Shui. The instant this madness appeared, Jiang Yong and Murong Shui made the quickest decision possible. The two of them worked together to form a barrier in front of them, and the members of the 3 guilds quickly gathered behind them. Grizzly Bear Regiment, come to me. Pang Zheng's brows furrowed, and he reacted. When he raised his right hand to block the storm, his brows were incomparably dark. This kid, the Su brothers from the Navigators gulped as well. Soon after, they looked at Jiang Wei with even more reverence in their eyes. No wonder Jiang Wei hadn't challenged Anti-Upheaval. It turned out they weren't as weak as they'd thought. The leaders of the other societies also made their decisions. In an instant, countless rays of light flashed in the arena. Even Xiao and Huai, who was watching from the sidelines, couldn't just sit back and watch. With a wave of his hand, he sealed off the area around Yi Zichen and the others, preventing the wind created by the sword energy from escaping. Only then did the pressure on the other student societies lessen slightly. At the same time, he also cut off the sword chi. When the sword chi dissipated, The proud Heavens Society captains who had been swept up by the sword, Chi, fell heavily to the ground. His body was covered with frightening sword scars, and fresh blood flowed from his wounds. The other members of the proud Heavens Society hurried over to help. Dilong's face was livid as he glared at Yi Zichen, who had his back to them. "Are you trying to start a war between the two groups?" As he spoke, the members of the proud Heavens Society glared at him with murderous eyes. Their killing intent soared to the heavens. Anti-Upheaval's members refused to back down. They gathered in front of Yi Zichen and stared back at the proud Heavens Society members. The two great societies were at each other's throats, and a great battle was about to break out. Guild leader Dilong, what is the meaning of this? Sensing the killing intent behind him, Yi Zichen turned around and saw nothing but chilling indifference on his face. "It's the 5 of you against me. I'm at an absolute disadvantage. What would you do if I was the one who was heavily injured? Let's stop the duel before it goes too far. I've stopped here." Yi Zichen interrupted him coldly. "If I didn't stop, do you think they would still be alive?" Yi Zichen's expression instantly turned cold. "You still haven't understood what it means to be a dog of the grizzly bears? Now you're biting me? Do you think I'm easy to bully? You've lost this round. If you still want to continue challenging, then next. Brat, you're courting death." The enraged Dilong ignored his injuries and was about to attack when Xiao and Huai appeared in the middle to stop him. "This is Skyspan Academy." Such a simple sentence made Dilong, who was in a rage, completely calm down. That's right, this was Skyspan Academy, not the D family estate. The old man before him was a bona fide ruler-level expert. This wasn't a place for him to behave atrociously. "You've already lost the duel just now. Since all 5 of you went up, you no longer have the right to fight again. I hereby announce that the Proud Heaven Society has lost their challenge against Anti-Upheaval. Are there any other student societies who wish to challenge us?" The other student societies fell silent out of fear. Challenge them? Did they really think they were invincible? Dilong's Proud Heaven Society had once been a powerhouse. Their overall strength far surpassed that of the other student societies. Furthermore, just now, all 5 of the Proud Heaven Society's platoon leaders had attacked at the same time, and the results were clear. It was miserable. Challenging Anti-Upheaval now? Wasn't that just looking to die? Yi Zichen's actions caused the other student societies to change their opinions of Anti-Upheaval. Although this new student wasn't on the combat strength leaderboards, after today, he'd most likely enter the top 10 or even the top 5. Anti-Upheaval had just experienced a major upheaval. To outsiders, it seemed like they were easy to bully, but after this battle, no one could ignore Anti-Upheaval's status as a powerhouse. They waited for a full 15 minutes, but the arena was silent. No one dared to challenge them. Xiao and Huai looked around, then came to a decision. "We've decided on who will be going to the Central Divine Mountain. Anti-Upheaval, Aspiration Society, Grizzly Bear Society, Appearance Association, and Navigators gather at the arena tomorrow. I'll take you to the Central Divine Mountain." Xiao and Huai's announcement brought the curtain to a close. After being used as a stepping stone twice, the Proud Heaven Society looked like defeated roosters. They left the arena, their faces ashen. The other student societies followed suit. Platoon Leader Yi, Anti-Upheaval's members, on the other hand, looked as if they were celebrating a festival. They ran over in high spirits. Yi Zichen's attack allowed them to directly witness his strength, and also allowed the entire student society to understand the strength of their student society. Every student society needed a name that could intimidate others. In the past, Anti-Upheaval didn't have one. Now they had one. It was Yi Zichen. Quite a few student societies that hadn't left took the initiative to congratulate Anti-Upheaval. With Yi Zichen on their side, they could no longer afford to look down on them. Naturally, they left this to Chun Guangfa. He was timid and cautious, but dealing with this sort of thing was a piece of cake. "Brother Yi, you really hid your strength well," said Jiang Yong with a grin. Jiang Yong chuckled as he walked over. "Old Jiang, I've never underestimated Brother Yi, but your performance today still leaves me gasping in amazement." "Brother Jiang, you praise me too much," laughed Yi Zichen. Platoon leader Yi, you just used Jiang Wei's move, didn't you? Asked Li Hu. Judging from your aura just now, I'm afraid you're much stronger than Jiang Wei. Yi Zichen merely chuckled, but didn't answer. How could an outsider know who was stronger and who was weaker? Society head, should we go over and spar with anti-upheaval? Asked the navigator Su brothers. Jiang Wei smiled calmly. No need. They're all going to the central divine mountain. If we don't go take a look, we'll have plenty of chances to meet in the future. There's no need to rush. The Su brothers knew they couldn't change Jiang Wei's mind, so they could only nod in agreement. Jiang Wei chuckled, hugged his rusted sword, and walked out of the arena. Before leaving, he glanced at Yi Zichen. Their eyes met, and they nodded at each other. Yi Zichen watched Jiang Wei leave, then thought back to the situation he and Jiang Wei had created. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Chapter 1284. Fourth on the combat strength leaderboard nightfall. Anti-upheaval's members celebrated in high spirits. As the star of the show, Yi Zichen naturally had to attend. However, considering that they'd be heading to the Central Divine Mountain the next day, they didn't keep him for too long. After congratulating Yi Zichen and the others on getting a good ranking on the Central Divine Mountain, the rest of the team members continued their celebrations. Shui Mo didn't stop them. To anti-upheaval, this was a cause for celebration. Considering how the members of the Anti-Upheaval Society had been working so hard for so long, she decided she might as well let them have their fun for the night. Yi Zichen, it's all thanks to you. Shui Mo smiled brightly at Yi Zichen before returning to her residence. Not really. I just did what I was supposed to do. Besides, even without me, Bebe could definitely have done it, and even better than me. Don't you think so, Bebe? Yi Zichen reached out and tousled Bebe's hair. Bebe nodded in satisfaction. You did well. You didn't embarrass big sister Bebe, but you're right. When they saw Bebe's smirk, Yi Zichen and the others couldn't help but smile at each other. Then, they headed back to their respective residences. Shui Mo waved at Yi Zichen. Rest well and build up your strength. Once we reach the Central Divine Mountain, we'll be in for a fierce battle. Yi Zichen watched Shui Mo and the others leave, then returned to his own room. He sat on his bed, but he didn't go to sleep as Shui Mo had suggested. Instead, he sat by the window and looked out at the tranquil night sky. His mind was filled with comparisons between himself and Jiang Wei. Yes, he and Jiang Wei had used the same technique, but the effects of their attacks were polar opposites. Berserk and gentle. Yi Zichen's berserk attack seemed frightening, and in the eyes of outsiders, he seemed even stronger. But deep down, he knew full well that compared to Jiang Wei, he wasn't just a little bit weaker. His berserk attack was because he couldn't condense his sword energy and let it leak out. But Jiang Wei had condensed it into a single thread. Even Yi Zichen had no choice but to admire this level of sword intent. Jiang Wei was number one on the combat strength leaderboards, and he was known as the Sword Immortal. He couldn't be underestimated. Secondly, the sudden change in the rules of the student society battles meant that the 9 divine mountains would take place on the Central Divine Mountain. If the God Realm held it by itself, that wouldn't be a problem, but now that the Yao and demons were involved, things couldn't be so simple. More importantly, Qiao and Huai had said the Yao and demons had asked the God Realm for permission. At this critical juncture, Yi Zichen was certain that the people of the God Realm would be on their guard. It could be assumed that the God Realm was unable to refuse, or perhaps they had no choice but to agree under pressure. That was why Qiao and Huai had personally appeared and announced that he would escort Yi Zichen and the others to the Central Divine Mountain. He has ulterior motives, Yi Zichen muttered as he looked at the night sky outside the window. Perhaps very soon, it would be very difficult to see such a tranquil night. However, for some reason, Yi Zichen's mind began to race. If he went to the Central Divine Mountain 9, might Tian might Lu Qing. Long Yi. Yi Chun Chun. Yi Chun Long Yi. Upper. Upped. Tian. Moreover, once he reached the Central Divine Mountain, he would be able to see his old friend, the Shao family. There are so many people who can see it. Just thinking about it makes me excited. The cigarette gradually burned out. As he spoke, Yi Zichen tossed his cigarette, but to the ground, then crushed it with his foot. He looked out of the window with a faint smile, then walked to the bed and lay down gently. As they headed to the central divine mountain, anti-upheaval's lineup remained the same. By the time Li Hu, Luo Zi, Yi Zichen, Shui Mo, Chun Guangfa, and Shui Bebe arrived, the Aspiration Society and Appearance Association were already there. Brother Yi, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Seeing Yi Zichen and company come over, the people from the two clubs all came over. Pan Sheng naturally went with Jiang Yong, but as for the other four, apparently, for the sake of the spots to enter the central divine mountain, the members of the Aspiration Society had fought for the entire night. In the end, the strongest four had been chosen to go with Jiang Yong's group. The Appearance Association, on the other hand, was much more harmonious. Murong Shui led the 4 golden flowers of their association. As for the substitutes, they didn't even get to choose. It wasn't that Murong Shui didn't want to choose, but the girls in the association didn't like fighting and killing. Anti-upheaval, the Aspiration Society, and the Appearance Association could be said to have deep revolutionary friendships. Jiang Yong and Murong Shui had brought them over to get to know each other. Once they reached the central divine mountain, they'd be able to take care of each other. Brother Yi, these are our Aspiration Societies. After the introductions, everyone who'd come with Jiang Yong and Murong Shui greeted Yi Zichen and the others, especially Yi Zichen. Yesterday, he'd single-handedly swept aside the proud Heaven Society's 5 platoon leaders. They'd all seen it with their own eyes. After that battle, they'd already begun to view Yi Zichen as an equal to Jiang Wei. Right, Brother Yi, did you know that our Academy's combat strength leaderboards were updated last night? Jiang Yong put his arm around Yi Zichen's shoulders and winked. Guess what your ranking is? I'm on the leaderboards? Of course. You were so fierce yesterday. How could you not be on the leaderboards? Guess what your ranking is? 4th. Before Yi Zichen could guess, Murong Shui said in exasperation, "Just look at his winking face." Just now, he was so smug about how Zichen's ranking wasn't as high as his. You didn't see his schadenfreude. What do you mean schadenfreude? Jiang Yong argued. I'm not. Yi Zichen knew what kind of person Jiang Yong was, so he didn't care too much. What surprised him, though, was that he directly entered the top 5. It's your first time on the leaderboards, and you're already in the top 5? Platoon Leader Yi, you're too terrifying, said Luo Zi speechlessly. I know, right? Jiang Yong, why are you laughing at my misfortune? Zichen's already in 4th place, and he's only made 1 move. Once we get to the central divine mountain, you'll be overtaken, said Murong Shui. I'm not laughing at your misfortune. Jiang Yong straightened his neck, but before long, he sighed inexplicably. But you're right. I'm afraid Brother Yi will soon surpass me. It took me more than 10 years to climb to 3rd place. Compared to Brother Yi, it's quite sad. Don't be so sentimental. Murong Shui glared at him. Just as anti-upheaval, the Aspiration Society, and the Appearance Association were chatting merrily, another student walked into the arena. As soon as they appeared, Yi Zichen and the others sensed an aura envelop them. When they turned around, they saw that it was the Grizzly Bear Society. Chapter 1285. Pang Zheng admits defeat, Grizzly's men. The members of the Aspiration Society whispered among themselves. The appearance of the Grizzly Bear Society had changed the harmonious atmosphere. The members of the 3 clubs stopped talking at the same time and looked at the grizzly bear who was walking towards them. Li Hu's hand went to the back of his waist, where he kept his battle axe. They're all here. Pang Zheng walked over with a wide smile and smiled at Yi Zichen and company. As he spoke, he even extended his hand. Seeing this, Li Hu was just about to pull out his axe when he saw Pang Zheng place his hand in front of Yi Zichen. We may have had our differences in the past, but now that we're all heading to the Central Divine Mountain, we're bringing glory to both the Northern Divine Mountain and Skyspan Academy. I hope that all of you can let go of your past grievances and unite against an outsider. In that mellow laughter, his gaze was also very sincere. Yi Zichen, Shui Mo, Jiang Yong, and Murong Shui couldn't help but frown. They knew full well what kind of person Pang Zheng was. Letting go of past grudges so easily wasn't something he could do. As for Dilong, He was clearly the leader of the proud Heaven Society. Why was he here with the grizzly bear? Surprised, right? Noticing their gazes, Pang Zheng took half a step back and gave way to Di Long. Di Long recently left the proud Heaven Society and joined our grizzly bear society. This is so that we can send our most elite forces to the Central Divine Mountain. As you all know, we'll be facing the geniuses of the various Divine Mountains, as well as experts from the Yao and Demon realms. Di Long is 4th on the power level leaderboard. No, he's 5th now. 4th place went to Brother Yi. However, Di Long is still our Academy's top-notch combat power. It would be a pity if he doesn't participate. I have to congratulate Brother Yi for entering the combat power ranking and entering the 4th rank. This is even more dazzling than Jiang Wei at that time. The current Pang Zheng was like a completely different person, or rather, he hadn't changed at all. He had always appeared to be a righteous, honest, tolerant, and humble person in the outside world. However, after encountering Yi Zichen, a series of events had caused his character to crumble. Now, he had returned to his previous persona. Di Long nodded, then looked at Yi Zichen and the others. Brother Pang is right. This is the result of our discussion last night. I hope that everyone can let go of their grudges and take care of each other. The surrounding people's gazes were still unfriendly, but Yi Zichen merely smiled and swept his gaze over them, then nodded. Of course that's good. Besides, I don't have any enmity towards you in the first place. If you can let it go, everyone will be happy. When we go to the Central Divine Mountain in the future, we'll all be on the same side. We should look out for each other. I'm relieved to hear Brother Ye's words. Pang Zheng smiled gently. Then we won't bother you any longer. You can continue. The grizzly bears took the initiative to leave the area to Yi Zichen and the others. After they left, Shui Mo furrowed her brows. You believe them? Do you believe it? Yi Zichen naturally didn't believe it. A person's personality was the truest when he was angry. Pang Zheng and Di Long had both destroyed their personas when they were angry, but now they suddenly became good people again. Believe? Only an idiot would do that. However, you couldn't slap a smiling face. Di Long had joined Pang Zheng's society, and they were heading to the Central Divine Mountain. Then, the two of them had suddenly changed their attitudes and taken the initiative to admit defeat. Even if they were plotting something, this wasn't the time to bicker over it. Don't worry about whether or not they're telling the truth. Pang Zheng is right. Once we reach the Central Divine Mountain, we'll all be on the same side. Besides, they took the initiative to admit defeat. How could I possibly slap them in the face? On the surface, it's fine. As for private matters, so long as we don't let outsiders provoke us, no matter what schemes they have, they won't be able to do anything. Zichen's right. Momo, let's just listen to him, said Murong Shui. Humph, a hypocritical, smiling tiger, snorted Li Hu, rolling his eyes. In short, Pang Zheng taking the initiative to get on their good side had some effect, but it wasn't enough to make Yi Zichen and the others accept him. In truth, Pang Zheng had never considered it that way. He simply had to do it. He had no other choice. The Grizzly Bear Society situation was rather awkward. The navigators weren't their allies. Originally, he'd thought that if the proud Heaven Society could trample over anti-upheaval and reach the Central Divine Mountain, their alliance would be stronger than the Aspiration Society and the Appearance Association. As for Jiang Wei of the Navigators, he couldn't do much against the Grizzly Bear Society and the Proud Heaven Society. Even if he was strong, Pang Zheng knew he wasn't his match. However, no matter how tyrannical he was, he could still challenge the alliance of two top student societies. However, the Proud Heaven Society had lost, and thoroughly at that. After this battle, he realized just how tyrannical Yi Zichen was. Furthermore, the Aspiration Society, Appearance Association, and Anti-Upheavals Alliance made his Grizzly Bear Society's situation even worse. Continuing to oppose them would only bring them harm, not benefit at all. They might as well give in and wait until they reached the Central Divine Mountain before making other plans. A few minutes later, the navigators arrived as well. As soon as they arrived, they found a place to rest. They didn't interact with anyone else. Jiang Wei was dressed in black robes and clutched his rusted sword. His expression was as proud and aloof as ever. He leaned against a tree trunk and didn't look anyone in the eye. "This Jiang Wei really is arrogant," snorted Li Hu. "He's an expert, after all. It's hard not to be a little arrogant." Yi Zichen patted Li Hu on the shoulder, then glanced at Jiang Wei discreetly. His performance the day before had been carved into Yi Zichen's heart. At that moment, several figures appeared in the air above the arena. Their leader was Skyspan Academy's vice dean, Xiaohuai. He was accompanied by a dozen or so others. All of them stood in the air, and their auras were extraordinary. "Why are there so many people?" Shen Guangfa looked up at them and was speechless. "Could it be that they want to go to the Central Divine Mountain with us? Is there a need for that? We're just going to compete, not fight a war. Furthermore, these are all the teachers in our academy, and they have the highest cultivation bases. If they leave, our academy's strength will be halved," said Dai Xiaoyu of the Appearance Association. The others furrowed their brows as well. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes at the people overhead. They were all diviners, and their cultivation levels weren't low, either. Chapter 1286. They must enter, everyone's here. Xiaohuai stood at the front of the group and glanced at the students below. When he saw that Dilong was among the Grizzly Bear Society, he said nothing. Instead, he nodded to the teachers behind him. Immediately, 6 teachers walked out from behind him. Materials kept falling from their hands into the void. Then, the other teachers used their divine powers at the same time. The combined might of over 10 divinities went without saying. Everyone's vision flashed, dazzling. When the light dissipated, a pitch-black wormhole that seemed to want to devour the surroundings appeared in front of them. "We'll enter the Central Divine Mountain through a wormhole." The surrounding students were still wondering why a wormhole had been constructed here. When they heard Xiaohuai's words, they couldn't help but freeze. Through a wormhole? Wormholes were meant to connect 2 realms. However, it was common knowledge that wormholes weren't very stable. It was possible for spatial faults to occur along the way, causing one to end up stranded in the outer realms. However, there were spatial transfer formations between the divine mountains and rivers in the God realm. Their stability went without saying. Compared to the spatial transition town, the wormhole was inferior to the teleportation formation in terms of both the speed of spatial transition and stability, especially since this was a newly constructed wormhole. They didn't even know if there would be spatial turbulence inside, yet he wanted them to abandon the transfer formations and enter the Central Divine Mountain through a wormhole. If this weren't Skyspan Academy, they might even suspect that Xiaohuai was someone else in disguise. "Can't we use our transfer formations anymore? Why are we abandoning the transfer formations and using a wormhole?" Pang Zheng of the Grizzly Bear Society furrowed his brows. He couldn't understand Xiaohuai's actions at all. There were far too many uncertainties that could arise from a wormhole. He didn't want to encounter spatial faults or spatial turbulence and be swept out into the outer realms. "I can't explain this to you, but we have to go through a wormhole to reach the Central Divine Mountain." Xiaohuai glanced coolly at Pang Zheng, then walked toward the wormhole. "Follow me closely. The wormhole has only just been constructed, and the inside isn't very stable yet. If you fall behind and get swallowed up by spatial faults, I won't be responsible. Of course, if you don't want to go, you can leave. No one will stop you." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaohuai walked into the wormhole. A few teachers followed behind him. At the same time, a few teachers were left outside. They were probably here to bring up the rear. None of the societies moved, but Jiang Wei from the Navigators was the first to lead his members into the wormhole. "We have to use the wormhole." Yi Zichen thought back to Xiaohuai's words, especially his must. "Let's go as well. With the dean around, there shouldn't be any problems. He won't joke around with our lives." When Jiang Yong and Murong Shui heard this, they smiled. "Then let's go. Mo isn't afraid. What's there to be afraid of?" There weren't many people in Skyspan Academy who knew who Shui Mo was. Jiang Yong and Murong Shui were the only 2 who did. Their families had always been on good terms with the Sea of Innocence, and Murong Shui had grown up with Shui Mo. When Murong Shui said that, she wanted to say that if even the second miss of the Sea of Innocence wasn't afraid, Why should they be? However, she couldn't reveal Mo's identity, so that was all she could say. Anti-upheaval, the Aspiration Society, and the Appearance Association entered the wormhole one after another. Only the Grizzly Bear Society hadn't moved. Are you still going to the Central Divine Mountain? If not, we'll be on our way. The teachers still outside the wormhole sounded unfriendly. They'd worked together to set it up. Although they didn't dare say it was 100% stable, they were confident. They'd all gone in, except for the Grizzly Bear Society. They didn't trust their wormhole design skills. Or did they think they were precious? Were they afraid of death? Society head, are we going in? The Grizzly Bear Society leader gulped as he watched the wormhole devour everything around it. It wasn't just Pang Zheng. The other leaders didn't want to go in either. Or perhaps it was better to say that birds of a feather flocked together. Pang Zheng's friends were just like him. Are we going in or not? The teachers outside urged once more. Pang Zheng stared intently at the wormhole, then gnashed his teeth. We'll go through the spatial transfer formation. Humph. Why didn't you say so earlier? You wasted so much of our time. If you want to go through the Central Divine Mountain, go straight to the Divine Martial Academy. I wish you luck. After leaving such a sentence, the teachers outside walked into the wormhole. Pang Zheng watched as the wormhole disappeared, his expression unsightly. He knew that his decision had left a bad impression on Qiao Huai and the other teachers, but go through the wormhole? My life isn't that cheap. Pang Zheng snorted inwardly, then turned to the other leaders. Let's go to the spatial transfer formation. After the teachers entered the wormhole, the entrance of the wormhole was gradually sealed. This was a single-use wormhole. Once it was used, it couldn't be used a second time. When they saw that only the teachers had entered, the students froze. Qiao Huai furrowed his brows. What is it? The Pang family brat says he wants to go to the Central Divine Mountain through the spatial transfer formation. He doesn't want to go through our wormhole, sneered the teacher. Then let them be, said Qiao Huai. Based on their conversation, it was obvious that the spatial transfer formation could be used. In any case, they'd already entered the wormhole. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to, so Jiang Yong asked casually, Dean, why do we have to go through the wormhole? That's right. Dean, just tell us. In any case, we're already in here. We can't leave, chimed in Li Hu. Qiao Huai sighed. There's no point in knowing too much, but I can tell you that it was Senior Brother Chui's decision to let you go through the wormhole. This Senior Brother Chui, Qiao Huai spoke of, was the Dean of Skyspan Academy, and he was even stronger than Qiao Huai. However, this Dean had always roamed the outer and inner realms. Most of the time, he wasn't in the academy, so Qiao Huai was in charge of everything. When they heard that it was Dean Chui's decision, Jiang Yong and the others couldn't help but arch their brows. Yi Zichen, who'd already thought about it, couldn't help but ask, Is there danger there? Qiao Huai didn't retort. There might be, and there might not be. However, going through the wormhole is definitely the safest choice. After stabilizing the surrounding space with the other teachers, Qiao Huai glanced at the student societies in the wormhole. Chapter 1287. A bunch of ancestors you can't offend God realm, Central Divine Mountain. The Central Divine Mountain was the head of the God race's 9 divine mountains. Surrounded by the other 8 divine mountains, the Central Divine Mountain was, without a doubt, the God race's heartland. There were a total of 7 cities on the mountain, arranged in a hexagonal shape. Any one of them could house tens of billions of cultivators. Heavenly God City was the capital city of the Central Divine Mountain, located right in the center. The most elite of the God Realm warriors lived here, as well as countless powerful factions. The relationships between these factions were tangled and complicated, and their highest leader was the God Emperor's estate, which Zhou Wu had established. The Divine Martial Academy, which was about to host the battle of the 3 realms of geniuses, was also located in this city. In the wilderness outside Heavenly God City, ancient, mottled trees stretched as far as the heavens. This was a completely undeveloped area, and the sounds of birds chirped and the fragrance of flowers filled the air. Animals that hadn't even reached the level of Yao could be seen darting through the forest. This was a pure land the gods had left for them. Inexplicably, the animals scattered in all directions, as if they'd been frightened. Soon after, the surrounding space in the wilderness suddenly distorted violently. A pitch-black cave suddenly appeared in the sky. Before long, several people emerged. They were none other than the students from Skyspan Academy, who'd come from the northern Divine Mountain. We finally made it out alive. As they inhaled the fragrance of nature, some of the students couldn't help but sigh. Although the teachers who'd come with them weren't as excited as the students, they could sense the joy of surviving a calamity in their eyes. Their trip to the wormhole hadn't gone as smoothly as they'd imagined. Although they'd used the most expensive materials to construct the wormhole, and over a dozen diviners had worked together, they'd still overestimated the wormhole's stability. Halfway there, the wormhole caved in on a large scale. The spatial turbulence almost dragged them into the outside. Fortunately, Chiu and Huai, a ruler-level expert, managed to stabilize the wormhole and prevent anyone from getting sucked into the turbulence. After emerging from the wormhole, Chiu and Huai didn't lead the students any further. After a few breaths of time, the space in front of them collapsed. Everyone who'd experienced the spatial rupture instinctively took a few steps back. Not long after, a red-haired, brawny man walked out from the collapsed space. His appearance instantly raised the surrounding temperature by several times, and everyone felt a wave of heat assaulting their faces. Beside him was a middle-aged man with a mustache and a smile that resembled the Methria Buddha. "Old Chiu, you've made us wait for a long time." The mustached man smiled and took a few steps forward. There was a hint of reproach in his eyes. From his tone, it could be heard that he and Chiu and Huai were old acquaintances. There were some problems in the middle. Chiu and Huai smiled. "I don't care. Anyway, you made me and Vulcan wait for a few days. Shouldn't you make it up to us?" Yes. Chiu and Huai shook his head with a smile and said, "But before that, bring us to the Divine Martial School. Us students have just experienced a little trouble. We have to let them rest well." "Of course." The mustachioed man smiled faintly. He made a grabbing motion toward the sky and took out a brush. He dipped his brush in the air and drew several strokes in the air. Several eights appeared in the sky. Then the mustachioed man sent the brush back into the void. "Take a seat. My calligraphy will take you directly to the Divine Martial School. Someone will arrange accommodations for you there." What kind of divine ability was this? Yi Zichen and the others stared at the translucent eights in a daze. They never would have guessed that this kind-looking mustachioed man was actually a ruler-level expert. Chiu and Huai nodded at the students. Yi Zichen and the others didn't suspect anything and stepped onto the characters. "Little friend?" Just as the students and teachers were about to step onto the characters, the mustachioed man suddenly reached out his hand. Everyone looked at him and realized that he was pointing at Yi Zichen. Shui Mo and the others arched their brows in surprise. Yi Zichen pointed at himself in confusion. "Me? That's right, little friend." The mustachioed man nodded. "I don't have any words for you. Stay here. I'll take you somewhere in a bit." Yi Zichen was a bit confused, but he still stepped off the characters. As soon as he did, he discovered that it was just as the mustachioed man had said. If he weren't included, those characters would be enough to get everyone else to leave. "Senior, where are you taking Yi Zichen?" The mustached man furrowed his brows, but when he saw the faintly discernible mark on Shui Mo's forehead, his furrowed brows instantly relaxed. He wanted to laugh, but he didn't want to embarrass himself. "I naturally wouldn't harm him. Besides, your dean is with us. What's there to worry about?" Seeing this, Chiu and Huai inexplicably wanted to laugh. He was certain that the mustachioed man had figured out Shui Mo's identity. In truth, ruler-level experts like them could ignore even the heirs of large clans. Any ruler was worthy of the world's reverence, but the Shui family's daughter was an exception. Not because of his father, but because the Sea of Innocence had Zhao Qianhe. "What are you standing around for? Hurry up and send the Shui family's 2 ancestors away," transmitted the mustachioed man through narrowed eyes. Chiu and Huai glanced discreetly at the mustachioed man, then nodded. "Go to the Divine Martial Academy. I did leave Yi Zichen behind for some business. Once I'm done, I'll send it back to the academy to meet up with you. Shui Imo nodded, then rode the mustachioed man's characters and disappeared into the sky. The mustachioed man let out a long sigh. Why are the Shui family's two ancestors here as well? Oh, well, Chio, you've got guts. Don't you know what's behind the battle of geniuses? If something happens to them, won't that ancestor cut off your head? If I told you it was that ancestor's doing, would you believe me? Said Chio and Huai helplessly. Really? The mustachioed man froze. Yi Zichen stood to the side, completely befuddled. His heart tightened with curiosity. Although he knew that these people were all extraordinary experts, and as a junior, he ought to serve them well. Seniors, what are you talking about? Unruly. Why were youngsters nowadays so unruly? But so what? This was an ancestor he couldn't afford to offend. The mustachioed man felt like he was being stifled as a ruler. He shouldn't have come here. He should have sent someone else to serve these ancestors. Chapter 1288. Someone's missing? The Lady Providence? Judging from the way she addressed him, he was absolutely no ordinary person. Wasn't that just nonsense? If even rulers called her Lady Providence so reverently, it would be strange if she was an ordinary person. As far as Yi Zichen could remember, there was only Lady Providence. Of course, there was also the Queen Mother. But the Queen Mother should still be down there. Could it be that the person looking for him really was Lady Providence? Although Yi Zichen was curious, he didn't ask any more questions. He could sense that the mustached man didn't particularly want to talk to him. However, he kindly set up a seal around himself to keep the red-haired man's heat at bay. The red-haired man also intentionally restrained the heat around him in order to make Yi Zichen feel more comfortable. These experts are all good people. The scenery around them changed. Roughly an hour passed. Heavenly God City was the God Emperor's capital, so the skies above it were forbidden to fly. However, when the guards saw the mustached man, they didn't dare stop him. They simply allowed him to fly. When they arrived in front of a courtyard, the mustached man stopped and slowly landed on the ground. The Lady Providence is waiting for you inside. It's not convenient for us to go in, so we won't be sending you in. The mustached man smiled at Yi Zichen, then glanced meaningfully at the red-haired man and Xiaohuai. The three of them left Yi Zichen in the lurch. Why did they leave in such a hurry? Yi Zichen glanced speechlessly at the direction they'd left. However, he didn't immediately enter the courtyard. Instead, he circled around it a few times. This wasn't a busy city. Finding a place like this in such a crowded and bustling city was no easy task. There was a very high-level restriction around the house that completely sealed off the entire house. Even though the outer walls were less than 2 meters tall, it was still impossible to see anything inside the house if one looked over the walls. As for who this courtyard belonged to, Yi Zichen had no way of knowing because there was no sign above the gates. They've already left. It's fine if I don't go in, right? Yi Zichen licked his lips. He wasn't familiar with the city, and he had no idea where the Divine Martial Academy was. Furthermore, the person looking for him was definitely an incredible figure. He figured he'd better not try anything funny and just go in. Just as Yi Zichen was about to push the door open, a beautiful figure suddenly flashed through the corner of his eye. But even though it was just a glimpse, his action of pushing the door stopped there. He gave up on the idea of pushing the door open and ran out of the alley. Xianji, do you think this is okay? In a house just separated by a wall, a graceful woman dressed in plain clothes asked cautiously. There was a woman sitting in the pavilion in front of her. The woman was dressed in white, and her eyes were filled with helplessness. It's just meeting our son. Isn't it fine as long as you don't wear anything too revealing? You've asked me dozens of times, and you've changed all the clothes in my house. Don't tell me you're not satisfied with any of them. I'm just a little nervous. Zichen, we haven't seen each other for 100 years. The woman who said she was a bit nervous was none other than Yi Zichen's mother, Yi Rong. The person she'd asked so impatiently was also known as the #1 figure beneath the God Emperor. She was the supreme leader of the profound pavilion, Lady Providence, Xianji. You're the mighty lord of 7 stars, yet you're nervous? Why didn't you feel nervous when you were teaching those diviners a lesson in the same palace? Xianji curled her lips in exasperation. This outfit is fine. Don't go back and forth. I don't have many clothes left, and your precious son is almost here. All right, I'll listen to you. After hesitating for a moment, Yirong nodded and agreed. However, after deciding on what to wear, she paced back and forth in the courtyard. She hadn't seen Yi Zichen in 100 years, and during that time, not a single night had gone by that she hadn't missed her son. Now, she was about to reunite with Yi Zichen. She couldn't contain her excitement. The mighty Lord of 7 Stars. Xianji couldn't help but shake her head and sigh, but she said nothing else. She could understand Yi Rong's feelings. It was just like when she'd reunited with the reincarnated Xia Lioli, the current Xia Kiki. She'd felt the same way. They'd reunited after such a long time, let alone a relative. That's not right, said Xianji with a frown. Given their speed, they should have arrived by now. Why haven't they arrived yet? Xianji calculated the time and frowned. They couldn't have run into trouble on the way, could they? Said Yi Rong worriedly. My goddess of 7 stars, this is the capital of the imperial capital. Even the Yao and demon emperors wouldn't dare cause trouble here. What kind of trouble could there be? Besides, I sent Xianji and the god of fire, the strongest of my 16 divine generals. If you're worried about your son, you should consider the situation first. She sighed helplessly at Yi Rong, then took out a jade slip. I'm going to ask Xianji and the others where they are. Use this time to calm down. You're a mother, after all, and the mighty Lord of 7 stars at that. Don't act like a mortal. Yi Rong knew she was being overly sensitive. She nodded, then sat down in front of the stone table. Xianji narrowed her eyes and sent the message. Before long, the jade slip flashed. After reading its contents, Xianji couldn't help but frown and spread her divine sense outwards. Not long after, she teleported to the front door and pushed it open. Nope. After a brief frown, Xianji held the jade slip in her hand. The mustached man, who was eating and drinking in a high-class restaurant in Heavenly God City, also received the news. He's not here. What did you send him to? Where are you? Quickly come and see me. Vulcan and Xiao and Huai couldn't help but ask when they saw the news. Mustache stood up immediately. What happened? You guys eat here. Her ladyship is looking for me. What happened? Seeing Xianji's serious expression, Yi Rong spoke up. The horoscope says Yi Zichen's already here, but he's not here. As soon as she finished speaking, Xianji saw Yi Rong's expression change drastically. She hurriedly comforted her. Don't worry. Your little fellow is probably curious about this city and has slipped away to play. Wait here, I'll go out and find him. I'll go with you. Don't worry and stay here. This is the capital city, the capital city. You're from a Saint Palace, the Saint Palace. Do you understand what I'm saying? Just stay here. Heavenly God City is my territory. I'll definitely bring your precious son back safe and sound. Chapter 1289. I don't know, Yi Zichen hurried through the streets of Heavenly God City. He couldn't help but look at the people walking on the streets. Just now, just as he was about to push open the door, he clearly saw Lu Qing walk past from the corner of his eye. There was no way he was mistaken. He was certain that it was Lu Qing. That's why he gave up on entering her residence and ran towards the alley. However, by the time he reached the corner, Lu Qing was long gone. Where the hell did she go? By now, Yi Zichen had lost track of how many alleys he'd passed through. There was a sea of people, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find her. That pearl looks pretty good. Miss, you have a keen eye. This pearl was made by Master Qian. It's called the Divine Accumulation Pearl. If you wear it long-term, it can increase your affinity with divine power. This is You sell such a fine artifact in a shop like yours. Although the streets were bustling with activity, Yi Zichen still heard the conversation. He suddenly turned around and saw a young woman in a blue floral dress standing in a shop no more than 10 meters away. She held a crystalline pearl in her hand. If the Divine Accumulation Pearl really was, as the shopkeeper said, it was an incredible divine artifact. Even if it wasn't sold in auction, at the very least, it wouldn't be sold in a shop that was no more than a few dozen square meters in size. The shopkeeper, who'd been caught lying, looked somewhat embarrassed. He felt like this girl was the daughter of a wealthy family, inexperienced and inexperienced. He wanted to see if he could extort some money from her. "Miss, what do you say?" "Why should I say anything? This is your product, so naturally you should be the one to bid. If I think it's suitable, I'll buy it. If not, I'll leave. That's all." 3,000 aureus. The shopkeeper gnashed his teeth. The young woman chuckled, then placed the pearl on the counter. "Wrap this pearl up for me." The moment the girl put it down, a handsome young man walked over to her side. He'd thought his business was over, but now someone wanted to buy it? The shopkeeper didn't hesitate. He hurriedly ordered someone to wrap it up. This was just a decorative item. At most, it would emit a bit of cold air. However, this was just an ordinary item for cooling off. If he sold it for 3,000 aureus, he'd make a killing. "Sir, your divine accumulation pearl." The boss smiled apologetically and handed the bead to the young man. The young man took the bead and handed it to the girl beside him. "Ching, this is for you. Senior brother Zhao, you should keep the treasure you bought for 3,000 aureus." As she spoke, she held up a folded umbrella in her hand, smiled faintly, and walked out of the shop without looking back. However, the moment she turned around, Yi Zichen saw the side of her face, Lu Jing. Yi Zichen ran over and grabbed Lu Jing's hand. The sudden tug caused the umbrella in her hand to fall to the ground. She turned around, and the two of them stared at each other. Yi Zichen's eyes were filled with shock. He couldn't help but laugh. "I'm here for you." 100 years ago, Yi Zichen had promised to go to the God Realm to find her, but too many unforeseen events had occurred. Only now did he truly stand in front of Lu Jing. Yi Zichen believed that with their relationship, there was no need for words. He reached out to hug her, only to see her expression gradually change from shock to fright, then to disgust. She yanked her hand out of Yi Zichen's grasp, took a few steps back, and glared at him. "Who are you?" Those 3 simple words sent Yi Zichen plummeting into the abyss. He stared into Lu Jing's eyes, which were filled with confusion and bewilderment. He knew now. She was blaming him for coming too late. Well, that's right. He'd only come to see her after 100 years, and that was only because he'd followed the academy to the Battle of Geniuses and coincidentally met her. Yi Zichen knew just how precious 100 years was to a girl. "All right, don't be angry. I know I'm late. How about I apologize? How about this? I've already connected to the God Realms network. I'll give you my phone and let you watch your favorite anime. Okay?" As he spoke, Yi Zichen also found a few movies that Lu Jing had saved his phone. When she saw the screen, Lu Jing's eyes flashed with cold light. She reached out and slapped Yi Zichen across the face. "Scoundrel!" At the same time, the youth who'd spent a fortune on Lu Jing's pearls stepped between them and pushed Yi Zichen back several steps. "Who are you?" Lu Jing's slap completely stunned Yi Zichen. He gripped his phone lightly. Although the youth was blocking his view, his gaze was fixed on Lu Jing, who stood behind the youth. "Lu Jing, what are you doing?" Isn't this what you used to pester me to see when you were lying on my bed?" "On the bed?" The youth's expression darkened. He glanced at the screen out of the corner of his eye. "You're actually saying that Junior's sister would watch such an unsightly scene? Who are you? This has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and scram." Yi Zichen shoved the youth. The youth's gaze darkened, and a silver light appeared around him, forcing Yi Zichen back. Quite a few people on the street sensed that something was wrong. Quite a few of them had already begun to avoid the area. "Men, beat him up." With that, 4 men appeared in front of the youth. From the fluctuations of divine power they radiated, quite a few bystanders could tell that they were Sky Supremes. Furthermore, the youth's attendants were Sky Supremes. It was obvious that his background was extraordinary. "Lu Jing, beat him up." Yi Zichen and the youth spoke at practically the same time. The attendants' gazes hardened, and they charged at Yi Zichen. Scram! The Sky Supreme level attendants posed no threat to Yi Zichen at all. With a wave of his hand, he slapped them all across the face. Their faces swelled up, and a few of their teeth fell out. Yi Zichen paid them no heed at all. He took one step at a time, then another. "Stop right there." The youth reached out and patted Yi Zichen on the shoulder. Yi Zichen's expression darkened, and he grabbed the youth's arm. The instant Yi Zichen grabbed him, the youth sensed that his strength was extraordinary. Scram! Yi Zichen threw the young man into the middle of the street, then stopped around 10 meters away from Lu Jing with a confused look in his eyes. Lu Jing, are you done messing around? I don't know you, said Lu Jing sternly. Chapter 1290. Chapter 1290. Amnesia. Countless onlookers gathered on both sides of the street, including on the roofs of the shops. Yi Zichen yelled with all his might. He couldn't understand why Lu Jing would tell him that she didn't know him. He was certain that he didn't recognize the wrong person, whether it was his appearance, mannerisms, or aura. It was enough to prove that the girl in front of him was the little ghost girl, Lu Jing, who followed him desperately back then. She clearly looked forward to Yi Zichen coming to the God realm to find her, and she clearly said that she would wait for him. But why is she acting like she doesn't know him now? Lu Jing, I'm Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen roared angrily once again. Lu Jing, who stood in front of him, was stunned, while Yi Zichen's roar echoed through her mind. I'm Yi Zichen. I'm Yi Zichen. I'm Yi Zichen. The same words echoed through her mind. Lu Jing looked at him in shock. Emotions can't lie. From the looks of a stranger in front of her, they knew each other. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't remember who this person who said that he was Yi Zichen was. The name Yi Zichen is so familiar, but why can't I remember? No, I definitely know him. I definitely heard the name Yi Zichen before, but why? Why can't I remember anything? Lu Jing knitted her eyebrows, while a hint of confusion appeared on her cold face. She really did feel like the name Yi Zichen was familiar, but she just couldn't remember. Lu Jing. Yi Zichen roared angrily once again. Lu Jing squinted her eyes and looked up. Yi Zichen, who is it? Brad, I'm going to kill you. At that moment, the young man that Yi Zichen had thrown out slashed towards Yi Zichen with a menacing expression. Just as the sword light was about to land on Yi Zichen's body, an illusory golden sword suddenly appeared and blocked the sword energy. Kid Yi, what are you doing? Did you know that you nearly died just now? Xin Yuanxiang's reprimand sounded out in Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness. Only then did Yi Zichen, who was in a daze, return to his senses and notice the menacing young man. Xiangjia, it's all thanks to you. Yi Zichen smiled gratefully, then retracted his thoughts and looked towards Lu Jing. She had really forgotten. It wasn't an act. He had really forgotten. What's going on? Yi Zichen gradually calmed down and frowned as he looked at Lu Jing. Did he lose his memory? This wasn't an idle drama. Besides, everyone was an immortal now. They could be considered gods. How could they lose their memories? He licked his lips, then took a few steps forward after a moment of hesitation. Don't come over. Yi Zichen could tell that Lu Jing's emotions weren't very stable, so he quickly stopped and reached out his hand to comfort her. Lu Jing, calm down. Amnesia, right? I can accept that. But let me tell you, we really do know each other. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your brother 12. Shui 12. You can't forget this, right? You two should always be together. You know, brother 12? That's for sure. We really know each other. Although I don't know why you lost your memory. I can assure you that we definitely know each other. To the right. Xin Yuanxiang's urgent shout suddenly rang out in Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness. When he heard that, he turned around and saw that the youth hadn't changed his mind. He was actually attacking him again. Scram! He kicked the youth in the stomach. Yi Zichen was currently worrying about Lu Jing's amnesia, but this brat didn't have any sense at all. The youth fell to the ground once more, but Lu Jing's expression didn't change in the slightest. Lu Jing, no matter how much I say right now, it's useless. When you go back and ask Shui 12, everything will come to light. He knows a bit about what happened between the two of us. All right, I'll go back and ask brother 12. Lu Jing nodded. Then can we leave each other's contact information? That'll be more convenient. As soon as Yi Zichen took out his transmission jade slip, Lu Jing coldly refused. No need, I'll go back and ask brother 12. Perhaps we really do know each other. But even if we do know each other, there's naturally a reason why I don't remember you now. Since I didn't want to remember you back then, there's no need for me to get to know you again. No. How did things suddenly turn out like this? Were all women's thoughts so terrifying? Yi Zichen wanted to explain, but after a moment's thought, he decided against it. Lu Jing was clearly very resistant to him, and he didn't know why she'd lost her memories. If he continued to tangle with her, his current impression of her would only plummet. Then we'll meet again if fate wills it. It'd be best if we didn't, said Lu Jing. Yi Zichen's shoulders trembled inexplicably. He laughed bitterly, but he didn't dwell on it. He turned, shoved his hands into his pockets, and turned his back to Lu Jing. However, before he'd taken more than a few steps, he felt a cold glint behind him. Lu Jing's voice rang out. Zhao Sheng, go to hell. The youth, who'd been beaten up so many times, was still relentlessly charging forward. This sort of unyielding spirit was worth learning from. However, Yi Zichen's patience had long since worn thin. Yi Zichen bent his waist and dodged the youth's sword, then grabbed the youth's ankle and dragged him to the ground. His right foot stomped down on the youth's wrist. Yi Zichen grabbed the sword that had fallen from the youth's hand and pressed it against the youth's throat. The sharp edge of the sword pressed against the youth's throat. The blade had already pierced through his skin, and blood was already seeping out. Under Yi Zichen's gaze, the youth felt as if he'd fallen into an icy cavern. His entire body trembled involuntarily. If you want to die, just say so. I'll give you a quick death. There's no need for you to provoke me over and over again. How dare you? Who dares bully a student of Four Directions Academy? At the end of the street, a fierce shout suddenly rang out. Everyone looked towards the end of the street and saw a middle-aged man with a vigorous appearance. He was dressed in a green robe and was striding over with a majestic aura. When Yi Zichen saw this, he pulled his sword away from the youth's throat. The youth ran behind the middle-aged man. Your Highness, 17th Highness. The middle-aged man greeted Lu Jing, then glanced at the youth. The youth called out in an aggrieved tone. Second uncle. When he saw the youth's injuries, the middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. How dare you injure a student of Four Directions Academy? Next, the middle-aged man's gaze landed on Yi Zichen. He waved his arm, and a wave of energy surged towards Yi Zichen. Chapter 1291. Take an inch, and take a mile. Don't be fooled by the middle-aged man's casual wave of energy. He was a peak diviner expert. Even a casual attack wasn't something a Sky Supreme like Yi Zichen could withstand. What's more, the enemy had launched a sudden attack, and Yi Zichen had only managed to defend himself in time. He retreated dozens of steps before the signs of his explosive retreat eased. He stabbed the sword in his hand hard into the ground. He infused the divine power in his body into the sword, and used the sword as a support to prevent himself from falling to the ground. Wiping away the blood at the corner of his mouth, this middle-aged man could be said to be cunning and ruthless. It looked like the wave of energy slammed into Yi Zichen's chest, but it was actually aimed at his dantian. Yi Zichen fished out a pill from his spatial ring and began to sort out his chaotic divine power. Then, he looked at the middle-aged man calmly. Lu Jing, who seemed to have nothing to do with it, couldn't help but frown lightly, but she didn't say anything. Second uncle, you're finally here. With someone backing him up, the youth Yi Zichen had beaten up quite badly frowned. He gnashed his teeth and snorted angrily at Yi Zichen. This brat doesn't know what's going on. Not only did he speak frivolously to Junior Sister, he even dared to attack me. Shut up. The middle-aged man coldly glared at the young man and snorted, Disgraceful thing, go to the side and wait. The middle-aged man's rebuke caused the young man's eyes to flash with anger, but he still cowered and retreated. 17th Prince, are you all right? The middle-aged man asked respectfully. I'm fine, Lu Jing said lightly. Zhao Yin said to the young man just now. I said I'm fine. Yes, as long as you're fine. Noticing the change in Lu Jing's expression, the middle-aged man hurriedly stopped asking. His attitude was so humble that the surrounding onlookers couldn't help but stare at him. Some of those with higher cultivation realms could already tell that this was a peerless expert who was at least a level 7 Heaven Realm expert. Although the young woman's cultivation base was not ordinary, there was still a certain gap between her and a high-level celestial being expert. To be able to make a high-level celestial being so fearful, and to even call her the 17th Highness. Which supreme being's descendant is this young lady? She's actually able to make even a heaven being so fearful. Didn't you hear that celestial being expert call her 17th Highness? They seem to be from the Four Corners Academy. The surrounding people whispered to each other. They couldn't help but be curious about Lu Qing's background. Just as the crowd was discussing spiritedly, the pupils of a rather old man shrank, and the hand holding the walking stick in his hand couldn't help but tremble. This young lady is the princess of the Four-Way Pavilion. As long as the name Four-Square Pavilion appeared, one could clearly hear the gasps of the surrounding people. The Bayan Emperor's reputation in the divine world was simply too high. He had survived 81 strikes of heavenly lightning to cross the divine world and obtain the Sword God's Godhead. He was also the only one whose true form was that of a demon, yet he occupied a mountain in the god race and called himself an emperor. Gradually, the onlookers began to look at Lu Qing with reverence in their eyes. Everyone knew that every prince in the Four Directions Pavilion was a treasure to Lao AI, so it was no wonder that expert at the celestial being realm treated them like that. Looks like that young man isn't an ordinary person. Someone in the crowd sighed softly. Geniuses were always surrounded by geniuses, and the people around those with powerful backgrounds were also similar. If the disparity between the two parties was too great, then there would be no intersection at all. This was the eternal principle. You beat the young one, and here comes the old one. No matter where you go, it's always like this. By now, with the help of pills, Yi Zichen's injuries were mostly healed. He smiled calmly at the middle-aged man, then shook his head. You've already beaten him up. You should be satisfied, right? Goodbye. Yi Zichen didn't want to get involved in too much trouble. He didn't want to make things difficult for Lu Qing. Furthermore, the man was from Four Directions Academy, while he was from Skyspan Academy. It wouldn't be good for the two academies to fight in private. Furthermore, the battle of geniuses involved both Yao and demons. In the grand scheme of things, the students of the god race were all allies. Yi Zichen didn't particularly like this sort of internal strife. Did I say you could leave? To his surprise, just as Yi Zichen didn't want to cause trouble, the middle-aged man suddenly spoke up. Yi Zichen had only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped. The instant he turned around, his pitch-black eyes flashed with an icy coldness. What do you want? When he saw Yi Zichen's attitude, the diviner frowned and swung his palm at him from afar. Yi Zichen was already on guard. He released his divine power, but he didn't try to block it. Instead, he channeled it into his legs to increase his speed and dodge the attack. After his first attack failed, the diviner seemed somewhat angry. He attacked Yi Zichen again and again. Don't go too far. Yi Zichen did his best to dodge. He didn't want to intensify the conflict. Back when the youth attacked him, he'd already let him off several times. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and attacked, but he didn't kill him. This diviner's appearance was no different. Yi Zichen took one of his attacks head-on. Yi Zichen originally wanted to say goodbye, but the diviner was relentless. This was just like the old saying, if you back down in the eyes of others, you are always weak and easy to bully. You've gone too far. You've so brazenly injured a student of Four Directions Academy and even insulted our 17th Highness. Do you think you could just leave like that? Snorted the middle-aged man. What a joke. Asked Lu Jing. Did I ever say anything frivolous to her? Also, can you stop spouting such pompous bullshit? There are so many people watching. Was I the one who injured you? Or was it one of your people who provoked me? I gave him so many chances, but he only went from bad to worse. Yi Zichen's expression was icy. Bullshit? Is that how you should talk to your seniors? With a rumble, the middle-aged man's aura spread outward. Yi Zichen, who was enveloped by this divine pressure, felt as if he were looking at a ferocious beast with its gaping maw. The beast's green eyes stared fixedly at him. Under this pressure, his body gradually stiffened. You're already a Sky Supreme, yet you don't know any manners. I really don't know which family's young master you're from, but that's fine. Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your useless seniors. I'll teach you how to behave in front of your seniors. As soon as he spoke, Yi Zichen saw the vicious beast in front of him suddenly open its maw. Light yellow mucus dripped from its mouth, and a pair of furry hands slapped towards him. Just as Yi Zichen was about to lose his composure, the vicious beast enveloping his heart shattered. Immediately after, he felt a pair of warm hands on his shoulders. A low chant that was as leisurely as the wind also rippled through this street.